This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Paul Sweeney on assignment in a pub in Ireland, I think is the closest assignment we can get landed, helping with the Irish GDP. Damian Sassower in today, which is a good and beautiful thing, off of the effect of a 50 basis point rate cut. We see it again today in equities with a nice lift to the market, fractional, but nevertheless green on the screen. But how has 50 basis points, Damian, affected your world of EM?
Well, we have a huge week of rate decisions this week. We have Australia. We have a number of others, Sweden. And so, and we also have a lot of Fed speakers. And we have a lot of Fed speakers, but I don't put too much stock in Fed speak. Really, we've got a UN General Assembly here. And as the Washington Post likes to point out, this is a UN desperate to save itself. So I think there's going to be a lot of headlines coming out of New York City.
Yeah,
today.
I agree. There's a difference this time. There's a real tension. And I would suggest maybe the China slowdown is there as well. Now,
yes.
China cut rates, right? What does that signal that China, did they do it? They
high real rates.
We cut rates.
Real rates in China, inflation adjusted, are very, very high still. There's plenty of room for them to cut, plenty of room for them to stimulate. But dollar yuan now, it's 7.05. We're at 7.25 not more than a few months back. So it's rallied quite a bit. And I think that strength is probably weighing on the minds of the PBOC. Out
2 years. What we're going to talk to Damian about today is what no one's looking for, which is maybe a real weak dollar trend. It's really not part of the zeitgeist. We welcome you. A very interesting week today. Joining us today, Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen, the former President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton, Yellen, a conversation in the 9 o'clock hour. Looking forward to that, but a lot of really good guests. We start strong in moments with Margit Patel. Good morning in the corridor on your commute. Listen to Bloomberg Surveillance nationwide, Sirius XM, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. Good morning on Android Auto. In the corridor, 99.1 FM Washington, our flagship, Bloomberg 1130 in traffic congestion, Midtown Manhattan, and 92.9 FM in Boston. Good morning to all of you across New England. And of course, out on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. That's the single best way to help Damian Sassower and the Sassower clan. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash. She survived the weekend. Lisa Mateo.
I did. I'm back here on a Monday. Here we go. So S&P futures right now up about 0.1%. They're up 7 points. We have Dow futures up about just a fraction of about 25 points. And we have NASDAQ futures up 0.1% or 38 points. So futures rising. Traders looking to speeches from Federal Reserve officials. Fresh insight on the pace of policy easing. Today we'll hear from regional presidents Raphael Bostic and also Austin Goolsbee. We'll head over to the bond market. We have the 2-year yield, 3.57%, down 2 basis points. A yield on the 10-year, 3.75%, and that is little change. Few companies making news. UniCredit raised its stake in Commerzbank to 21%. That's just days after the German government indicated it opposes a takeover of the lender. Then you have Citigroup facing fines from the Federal Reserve for its data management and risk controls in the U.S., and that can really affect its expansion plans into China. LVMH, ADRs down more than 3%. Analysts from Bank of America cut their rating to neutral, but they also downgraded others in the luxury sector, carrying Hugo Boss as well, carrying ADRs down more than 3%. And that's also affecting shares of Hermes, ADRs down about 3%. Also, the CAC in Paris is lower as well. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. And now on these equity markets, and yes, fixed income as well. Margit Patel joins us now from Allspring Global Investments with decades of experience of figuring out where free cash flow is, where the use of cash is to dividend growth. Margit, is Microsoft a dividend quality stock for you? They do a share buyback, and the stock off the pandemic, they've raised the dividend. They've raised the dividend off the pandemic 32% from 2019. That's the kind of dividend growth you want to see, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it's excellent, especially when you've had great capital appreciation in the stock, too.
I look, Margie, at Microsoft and I say, okay, they've raised the dividend, but Sweeney would tell me that it's only like a 1% yield as well. Can Margie Patel by just dividend growth and not yield?
No, I think you really have to look at a combination, because a lot of times, as you know, stocks that have a very high dividend, either A, are going to cut their dividend, or they don't have any growth in cash flow. And so you'll never have any capital appreciation.
Let me bring in, yeah.
The deal is because the stock is up so much.
Yeah, let me bring in Damian Sassower here on use of cash.
Yeah, well, Margie Patel, Paul Sweeney's not here, so we're going to talk about fixed income. We're going to talk about high yield debt, because I know that's a sector that you're still quite, bullish on. Talk to us a little bit about why you could be bullish on a sector in the global fixed income market that's up over 8% year to date.
Well, yes, high yield has actually done very well. It's one of the best performing sectors in the whole fixed income market. But really, when you look at high yield, the yields are low. Double Bs yield around 5 3/4, single Bs maybe 6 3/4. So in other words, 2 or 3 percentage points more than treasuries. However, the risk of default, bankruptcy, is very, very low in the corporate high yield market in the U.S. So therefore, the yield is low, but the risk is low, and you'll get to keep all that extra yield. So for a fixed income investor, it's a pretty good return. Unfortunately, we've had capital appreciation there too. So high yield bonds on average are only trading about a point or so below par. So there's not a lot of room for capital appreciation if rates fall. But still, for a conservative investor wanting income, it's a good return.
Now, I don't disagree with you there, Margie, but here's my concern, right? Yes, default rates are going to be low over the near term, but if we have some sort of an event, some sort of a sharp recession, or something blows up here, liquidity is going to drop in that market. My concern is bonds are made. You got to hold bonds for the long term. You got to hold them to maturity, right? Maybe not high yield, but what happens to your high yield returns if you're forced to hold those bonds for a little bit longer than you otherwise would?
Well, actually, if you look back to when the Fed first started to raise rates, a couple of years ago, a lot of people thought high yield would be risky because the yield spreads would blow out, and none of that happened. And the reason is, when you look at the high yield market today, they've never been in better shape as far as their capitalization.
Fair.
In other words, they have a lot of long-term debt, very short-term debt, so they really won't be, the companies won't be squeezed, so the credit quality will stay the same. And high yield coming out of the whole rise in rates was the very best sector. So I'm not too worried about that, just because the quality is good. Over half of all the issuance from the financial crisis has been to refinance short-term debt into long-term debt. So we think the high yield market is in good shape fundamentally, just lower yields.
Margie, into next year, is the revenue growth there, down the income statement, over to free cash flow, that you just believe in a sustained dividend growth?
Well, we've actually had pretty modest revenue growth this year, say 4%, which isn't bad when you've had the real economy growing at 1 or 2%, maybe 3%. And we're thinking we'll have low GDP growth, but that still says companies will be able to have revenue growth of 4%, because the S&P is not the same as the economy. And also, companies keep maintaining those very high profit margins, so we could have corporate profits of, say, 8 or 10%, a little less than this year, but still pretty good and better than the cash flow yield you get in bonds.
I look, Margie, at the sector call here, and let me just take one sector, which is the financials.
Yes.
Does their cash flow sustain so they have use of cash to reward shareholders?
I think they do, because in the financial sector, they have really, you might say, excess cash flow. There aren't a lot of alternatives for them to invest to increase shareholders over the long term. So it's really more of a yield play rather than a total return, capital appreciation plus dividend play.
Thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. Margie Patel with Allspring with us this morning to get us started. We've got a lot of good conversations coming up on the mystery of the equity market and futures. Let me give you levels. My word, rounded up, 5,800 SPX. We're not there yet. I'm just trying to give you some positive tone on a Monday. 42,000 in the Dow. I got a 20,000 print on NASDAQ 100. That's extraordinary. The Lori Calvasina Russell 2000, 2,200 is well. I look, Damian, where we are in the idea of U.S. exceptionalism. The candidates clearly to the election are going to emphasize that. is well. Does everybody else out there, including the Prime Minister of Japan on Francine Lacroix's panel today, do they believe in American exceptionalism?
I don't think the president of Brazil believes in American exceptionalism, if you heard his speech on the UN General Assembly yesterday. But I think what you're looking at here, and it's good that you mentioned financials with Margie, because I look at rate-sensitive equity sectors like utilities, properties. A lot of these sectors have rallied pretty significantly in the wake of what we saw here with the Fed. For those people who are looking for earnings growth to lead here, like tech, I mean, you might find yourself a little bit on the back foot. I think, you got to kind of pay a little bit mind to some of these other sectors and sort of that inclusive equity market earnings growth, Tom.
Listen to you.
Yeah.
Michael Barr, you and I are barely awake. He's on all cylinders.
Well, he's always on all cylinders.
Yeah, that's what there is.
Well, Michael Barr needs his fantasy team to step up a little bit.
God, yeah.
I just beat his pants off.
And it wasn't by much either.
He's seeing ghosts.
Futures up 6 with our news in New York City. Michael Barr.
Happy times. The House has unveiled a short-term stopgap funding bill to avert a partial government shutdown. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
The new deadline will be December 20th, setting up a Christmas showdown and delaying any action until after the election. Also in the bill is extra money for the Secret Service to protect presidential candidates. It does not include the proof of citizenship rider that Donald Trump had demanded be included. House Leader Mike Johnson says bare bones. Senate Leader Chuck Schumer says he's pleased. The procedural moves from here. House rules will look at it today. Vote expected Wednesday. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
The Israeli military says more than 300 Hezbollah targets have been struck so far. The warning comes as Israel launched another wave of strikes in southern Lebanon. The two sides exchanged heavy fire yesterday. The UN General Assembly is this week in New York City. President Biden will speak at the UN tomorrow. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says the president will join world leaders to discuss a wide range of global issues.
He will reaffirm America's leadership on the world stage. He'll rally global action to tackle the world's most pressing challenges, including climate, the opioid epidemic, mobilizing resources for developing countries, managing the risks and benefits of artificial intelligence, and helping end the brutal wars in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan.
President Biden heads to New York this afternoon. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Getting on front of our songs today, we're going to have a San Francisco theme here. It's because Christian McCaffrey's just killing it. I mean, injured and all that. And I mean, if you were to pick Christian McCaffrey in your Rotisserie,
yeah,
it's like a really difficult way to start the season. Joining us now, Damian Sassower, down in flames.
Down in flames. I will say this, Jordan Mason, who's come in place of a CMC, he's really done a great job there. And you look, I mean, this guy, what was his name? Jennings last night for San Francisco? He could have been found on waivers.
Juwan Jennings.
Juwan Jennings had a great game. I mean, look, San Francisco didn't close the deal at the end there, so your wife must be a little bit disappointed here this morning.
And down to South, I mean, you go down where LA, Shohei's killing it, but I mean, the Rams. Cooper, another Rotisserie League pick. Is there anybody on your Rotisserie League team not injured at this time?
I have Cooper Kupp also, so yeah, no, everybody's injured. But it didn't help Mr. Barr at all this weekend when I beat his pants off. So, I mean, look, I know how to work the waiver wire, Tom. It's about being flexible. It's about being nimble, taking what the market gives you.
Can I do an Orioles shout out today? Time stood still on Sunday afternoon. I watched 4 solid innings of Tigers-Orioles.
Yeah.
And to David Rubenstein and the people of the Orioles to have Jim Palmer is the announcer.
Yes.
He's the best.
He is the best.
He's the best.
With a shout out to John Miller with the San Francisco Giants.
Big series, Baltimore, New York. Big series coming up this week.
That's a big series. Jim Palmer, good morning down in Florida. Good morning, Mr. Cass, as well. Features up 6. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got modest gains on Wall Street. Indexes hovering near record highs. This is after the Fed's rate cut last week. Right now we have S&P futures up 0.1%, 5 points at 5,767. Dow futures little changed, up about 12 points at 42,457. NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, 30 points at 20,059. We have the 2-year yield 3.57%, down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.75%, and that is little changed. To currencies, we have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger, the euro weaker. Same for the British pound. We have Bitcoin up about 0.3% at around 63,000. Shares of Intel up more than 3%. Sources say Apollo Global Management, well, it's offered to invest as much as $5 billion in Intel. Now that comes as rival Qualcomm reportedly makes an approach about a takeover. And the Wall Street Journal reporting Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing and Samsung have discussed more than $100 billion of projects for chip factories in the UAE in the coming years. And finally, the U.S. and India, well, they've reached an agreement to work together on setting up a new chip plant in India. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. I just can't say it's the beginning of the UN week. We will be at an important summit tomorrow for UN Week. I'll be joined by David Gurr there for complete coverage of the international relations of the moment. And just to give you a vignette, I can't mention the world leader because of security, but here at our world headquarters at Lexington and 59th, a major head of a major nation just walked by, and Damian, his entourage was almost as big as yours.
Yeah, no, I
would have counted like 35 people helping out.
You know, I'm going to be helping out tomorrow as well. I won't be with you and David, but Alex Steele and I are going to be following you up at the Plaza Hotel. Yeah.
So you're there when everyone's awake.
Correct.
Because in the international relations game, folks, they don't click in until.
Are you going to stay till the end of the day? The Global Business Forum, Mike Bloomberg speaking at 5 o'clock.
I believe I'll leave.
Christina Georgieva.
Take the surveillance nap, and then I'll come back.
Okay.
For that as well. Big day here, and we're thrilled to be with Mr. Bloomberg at this summit tomorrow. Look for us at 7 a.m. There. We say good morning on YouTube. As we looked at fixed income yield, use of cash with Margie Patel, now on your equity market, Maria Vetmanet joins us now from State Street, where she's head of equity research, global markets research for the Boston shop. Maria, I look at the equity market, and it still comes back to a guesstimate on my need to own the Magnificent Eight. Do you underweight them, or do you add to the Magnificent Seven into 2025?
So good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me on the program. I love tech stocks. I think to me, tech stocks has been many things over the years. So they've been beta, they've been growth, they've been duration. What tech stocks are now, they are very, very strong balance sheets, like fortress-like balance sheet. And if we are debating if economy going into recession, not going into recession, what I want to have in my portfolio is quality stocks. And there is no better place to find quality than in Magnificent 7, 8. So that's exactly what I want to have in my portfolio.
It's uniquely American. It's State Street. Then do you focus on an American-centric view forward 3 years?
I mean, I have to say, I sit in Europe, and today's news about really difficult situation and European economy gives you a very American-centric view for sure. Yeah, I mean, looking ahead, I mean, tech looks like it can make earnings throughout business cycle, while other sectors, I mean, we have more cyclical sectors, more defensive sectors, more interest rate sensitive, less interest rate sensitive. They're really, really sensitive to what happens somewhere else. Within tech, we know that the AI excitement brings money from non-tech companies to tech companies, and that's likely to last at least 2-3 years. So they're going to make money through the cycle, which is really fantastic, a really exciting opportunity for investors.
Well, Maria, I know you have a strong preference for U.S. equities over Europe and the U.K., so this makes sense given, for our audience, the week data we saw out of Europe overnight, the PMI data, et cetera. But, talk to us a little bit about this concept of the Fed put. I have heard everyone under the sun talking about the Fed put over the last 48 hours and how it's back in play. What does that mean for you, and what does that mean for investor positioning?
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not going to be very original. I mean, to me, what Chairman Powell said I think he said it in Jackson Hole, and then he repeated last week when in the FOMC meeting, is that he's focused on labor market, and should labor market slow, he will step in and support economy, support labor market, i.e. support stock market. And should it not slow down, we have better earnings. So it is a wonderful situation for equity investors. And I think, the thing I'll draw a really strong contrast between Fed is starting cutting interest rates into fairly strong economy. And it's a huge, huge contrast with ECB, where we already, arguably in recession in the largest European economies, and they're still being slow and debating and discussing. So I think that's a really, really strong contrast. And I think that's kind of what equity markets are reflecting. Much stronger earnings expectation, much stronger kind of pricing power, much higher multiples in US versus Europe.
No, Maria, I completely agree with you. It's unprecedented what the Fed's doing here, cutting in the face of what is a relatively resilient U.S. economy. But my question is, we have equity markets here nearly at all-time highs. So despite the fact that it's doing, the former, what does this mean for valuations? What does this mean for performance going forward? Can you really sit tight with some of your quality equity holdings, i.e. the Mag 7, right? And feel comfortable and go to bed at night and know that it's going to be there in the morning?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question. And I have to say, it's been incredibly uncomfortable call for about a year now. We know that U.S. stocks are expensive. We actually know that the U.S. stocks are very, very crowded. And we know that within U.S. stocks, it's really tech that have huge positions, right? And that creates volatility. But I think what we saw with tech, which I thought was really interesting, so around earnings season, I think it was the last 5 or 6 earnings seasons, any disappointment we see in any sector, investors sell what they have, right? So they sell US tech. And then a couple of weeks in, we see strong earnings from tech. We see strong commitment to AI story. Investors come back. And I think it basically tells you that there is no other good growth story. There is no other kind of quote unquote good stocks you want to own. Right. So invariably investors come back, but a lot of volatility, I give you that.
This is important. Are they under-owned? Because of the incredible distaste to own their percentage position within the Standard & Poor's 500, are the Mag 7 under-owned by institutions and, dare I say, under-owned by retail?
I think, mathematically speaking, yes, I think you're absolutely right. Investors have below benchmark position in tech, exactly for the kind of concentration reason. But then if you kind of normalize for that, so if you normalize to kind of the usual underweight, there is a much, much bigger position now. So relative to kind of, I don't know, call it empirical benchmark, what investors normally have, relative to kind of normal position, there are big positions above that.
March,
much bigger than previously.
Thank you so much. Really enjoy that. Marcia, thank you so much. With us today, Marcia Ventmanet of State Street, with us on the need to be in the equity markets. As she said, this has been a long belief in Mag 7. I guess, Damian, we've seen this before, but all of a sudden it's Q4.
Well, if we're talking
about 10 days,
if we're talking quality, shouldn't we be talking about like UK value stocks? Look, we're talking about quality, and we're talking about Amazon. We're talking about Microsoft.
When do they move? We're addicted to the growthiness of it. Yeah. We get free cash flow with it. I don't want to.
It's a sentiment call, yeah.
Well, my opinion here doesn't matter. You've got more of an opinion than I do, but Lisa and I, we don't give out our opinion. And the answer is, as she says, it's just the one thing a lot of smart people have been wrong on this year.
Yeah. No, rate sensitive sectors, quality. That's kind of, for me, it's, as you pointed out with our first guest, Margie, it's all about cash flow.
I barely looked at foreign exchange today. At some point here, we're going to slip this in with Damian. 7.05 on renminbi. Yeah. It's speaking volumes as well. It'll be a good day. We've got a lot of good voices coming along. Henrietta Treyz will be with us, but far more. Damian Sassower on a 50-beat rate cut worldwide. From New York City on YouTube, subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. out on YouTube. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after last week's 50 basis point rate cut. Now, this week, traders are watching for the Fed's preferred price metric and data on U.S. personal spending and income for more clues on the strength of the economy. Today, though, we have a read on manufacturing and services. Right now, we have NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, 33 points, but at 20,061. We have Dow futures, little change up about 13 points at 42,457. And S&P futures up 0.1%, 5 points at 5,767. The two-year yield, 3.57%, down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 3.75%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, let's check with spot gold higher at $2,622 an ounce. We have Brent crude at $74 a barrel, WTI crude at $71 a barrel. Companies making news, General Motors, they say they're going to temporarily lay off 2/3 of the workers at its Fairfax assembly plant in Kansas. It's getting that facility ready to begin production of the next Chevy Bolt model. And some deal-making news. Blackstone's agreed to sell the company behind the budget hotel brand Motel 6 to India's Oyo Hotels for $525 million. It's an all-cash deal. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciate it. Damian Sassower in for Paul Sweeney today. This is incredibly well-timed. She's been a huge value add to what we do here at Bloomberg Surveillance out on YouTube, on your commutes, out on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, the corridor. Good morning, Washington, New York, and Boston. Henrietta Treyz joins us now from Veda Partners. Henrietta, got a really serious, timely question. All sorts of pundits writing this morning that the vice president had a pretty good weekend versus what the former president's doing. Fine. But she has to make a switch. She's got a lot of fat cat supporters. She wants to do an economic plan, but will it be too progressive, too liberal for her fat cat supporters?
It doesn't look like they think that way with their pocketbooks. If I'm not mistaken, Kamala Harris's latest fundraising round with Wall Street folks was $27 million. So it seems like her adjustment moving off of a 35% corporate tax rate and down to 28% is much more palatable to those donors. The capital gains tax rate has dropped from 39.6% to 28%. So it seems to be working.
How about salt tax within the drive time here? This is Damian from north of New York writes in, how about that salt tax, Ms. Treyz? Can Vice President Harris get over to an elimination of this onerous tax in select blue states?
Well, I'd go a step further and say that the House Democratic Ways and Means Committee is already over it. I've been hearing from staff there for the last 6 months that they are very happy to repeal the $10,000 cap. They have been that way for quite some time. It's a $1.2 trillion revenue raiser, but if you can go after some other items and increase the deficit by, $1 trillion, $2 trillion, maybe 2.5 you don't need to do the SALT cap going forward.
Okay, so Damian, you can go home now.
Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done for the Henrietta. You really need to clear up for me these 7 swing states, namely Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Nevada. What theme should Harris be playing to? Is it going to be Roe v. Wade, national security? Is it inflation? Is it growth here in the U.S.? Is it taxes? What themes does she really need to hit on to appeal to those voters?
I would say first amongst equals is abortion. The gender divide in the polling data on all these swing states and nationally is really stark, and women make up 52% of the electorate. Kamala Harris polls way above Donald Trump on the issue of abortion, which is now the #1 issue for American voters that are female and second only to the economy in New York Times polling data. So that's probably #1. Immigration at the southern border has been reduced back to pre-2021 levels.
Interesting.
So it's not the same level of urgency in terms of severe numbers that we've seen in the past. And Trump has migrated the conversation over to things that have been verified as false, such as Haitians eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. So I think that's neutered the conversation without Harris having to really try very hard. On the economy as well, you have positive data sets that is reducing the amount of urgency that independent voters feel about the economy right now.
Well, Henrietta, it's UN week here in New York, so I have to ask you about national security as well. Where does that stack up? Where does Israel stack up? Where does Ukraine stack up relative to the rest?
Almost nowhere. American voters just do not follow foreign policy the way that they follow other domestic issues. That's a perennial problem. There are voters in Michigan and Wisconsin who will follow this issue closely, but look at how many voters are in the third-party base right now. It's down to 2% Jill Stein voters, for example, in states like North Carolina and Wisconsin. That is your sort of outrage vote around Israel-Palestine, and it's just not present at this time.
I look, Henrietta, at where we are, and Greg Villiers, with his wonderful AGF note, really emphasizes this morning that the percolation state to state is about nothing but abortion. Do you agree with that as the key debate?
I think it's the key debate. Indeed, what I find really valuable to speak with investors about this who may not have it on top of their radar is to think about what happened in 2022. We had 9% inflation, surging migration at the U.S. border. Abbott was sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard, and Republicans still got walloped in the House and Senate. That's all the message you need. When female voters are thoroughly galvanized across the nation, which is what we're seeing from voter registration data, fundraising data, the urgency that Democrats and independents feel to vote, Democrats in particular, is comparable only to the 2008 Obama week. And then one more thing I'd add is that Harris's surge in favorability is comparable only to Bush's post 9/11 surge in his favor.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of movement there.
Cook Political Report. Here's what they got as toss-up. Arizona 11th, Georgia 16th, Michigan 15th, Nevada 6th, North Carolina 16th, Pennsylvania 19th, Wisconsin 10th. Do you have polling in those districts on this key issue of abortion?
Yes, there's polling. It's very limited, though. House polling data in particular is really difficult to pull off. The economy is always going to be #1. But the issue there, as we've seen for the last couple months now, is that that's really sort of a partisan lean. If you're a Republican, you think the economy is terrible. If you're a Democrat, you think it's fine. The issue is really independent and suburban voters who are trending in favor of Kamala Harris by anywhere between 8 and 13 points right now, including in a lot of those swing districts. And that's what we're watching. I think a key piece to watch is the potential scenario where Donald Trump wins the election and Republicans win the Senate, which is my expectation with 90% odds, but Democrats pick up the House. That's something that I talked about with investors a lot on the road last week. I think the odds are rising. It's because Democrats have so much money to spend down ballot that they can bolster and expand the map in these critical House races.
Henrietta, just talk to us about the timeline here as we get into the election in early November. Like what data points are you most looking at? Is it going to be the payroll print in the first week of October? No more debates. What dates really stand out to you as we kind of head in over the next 30 days?
Man, I wish it was the payroll data. I just don't see that transcending to the American voter. There's anywhere between 4 and 11% of the electorate that's undecided right now.
The Fed meeting,
and I
maybe.
think that you hear from the Kamala Harris campaign is that they're looking for millions of eyeballs at a time. So that means they're looking to do it. And Trump is also looking to do a 60 Minutes interview in late October, potentially eyeing an October 25th debate between Trump and Harris. And then, of course, the October 1st debate between Vance and Waltz is really the next thing.
Just out moments ago, New York Times Siena, I believe this is moments ago, Trump leads Harris 50 to 45% in Arizona. When you see a poll like that, Henrietta, we're all benumbed by it. I mean, it's like, it's just too much. Does that poll have veracity to you, plus or minus all the statistical noise?
I think the New York Times polling data is extraordinary. I mean, they're calling 250,000 people, or 150,000 people, 5,000 phone calls just to get folks on the line to answer these calls. But to illustrate how difficult the polling data is, the Arizona example you use is perfect. Before the debate, it was Kamala Harris +5, and now after the debate, it's Trump +5. This is an extraordinarily difficult science. I think it's important to take the averages. Harris has work to do in Arizona is the bottom line.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Henrietta. My answer is to ignore them all. Henrietta Treyz, we do not ignore. She's the Veda Partners and just brilliant here on the Derby to the 5th of November. This is exciting, Damian. I mean, it's sudden. It's like a British election.
Well, you know what? When Henrietta's, I really wish I had asked her. She is really focused on the fundamentals here in the U.S., on what this means for taxes, on what this means for the federal deficit.
Yeah.
Now, I know that doesn't impact bond prices directly. At least it hasn't in the better part of the last 2 decades. But we fixed income folk, we love that stuff. And, I think with the twin deficits here in the U.S. hanging over our heads, bonds rallying like this, I don't know. We'll see.
Equities rally here fractionally. NASDAQ up 0.2%, but green on the screen. The VIX 16.49. I'm going to vamp off the Detroit Free Press. Joining us now, the world and national news, gritty Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. 2 new polls taken after the second attempt on former President Trump's life show a slight lead for Vice President Harris among registered voters nationwide. Bloomberg's David Gura has more on the surveys from NBC News and CBS and Ipsos.
These polls are pretty extraordinary. They show her really holding her own, not making a huge advance against her opponent, but showing that even after the debate, convention, she's polling still pretty solidly against him and has this lead. Of course, it's within the margin of error in both of these polls, so that's something that no one's going to take for granted here.
Bloomberg's David Gura hosts the Big Take podcast. The explosion of violence that shattered the lives of dozens of Birmingham, Alabama residents over the weekend is thought to have started with a murder-for-hire plot aimed at one man. No one has been arrested. Investigators believe one of the 4 people shot to death outside a hookah lounge was the target of a paid assassination plot. The 3 others who died and 17 who were wounded were collateral victims, as are Birmingham residents at large. Mayor Randall Woodfin.
There's a certain element in this city, there's a certain element in this community who are too comfortable riding around with semi-automatic weapons, automatic weapons, convergent switches, and everything else, whose only intent, hell-bent intent, is to harm people, shoot people, kill people.
Mayor Woodfin says authorities will hold another press conference later today. Congressional leaders have a deal on a short-term spending bill that will fund federal agencies for about 3 months. The agreement, announced Sunday, averts a possible partial government shutdown when the new budget year begins October 1st. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Politics in Michigan as well, but sports, what a weekend. First of all, Boston College does it to Lansing. I mean, BC beat Michigan State, but other than that, Michigan sort of showed up finally.
Yeah.
Miami.
The Tigers.
University of Miami. Number 7 in the nation.
Are they number 7?
Number 7
I had
in the
no
nation.
idea.
Of course.
My word. Your kid's going to a jock school, huh?
Yeah, but Michigan really stood out this weekend. You're right. That was a hell of a game, USC. Yeah.
The Tigers, and I'm completely enamored by the school balls. But the Lions, and the Detroit Free Press says they won gritty. I mean, that's have they ever won not gritty?
That's true. Well, and even Coach Campbell said the week before when we lost, like I took a snap on the field. But he's saying, look, I didn't have the boys prepared, and this week he had them prepared. Yeah. They look great. Unfortunately, Sam Laporta Our tight end, he got hurt,
Right.
so we'll see.
What do you take away from the New York Football Giants?
Well, I mean, I can't remember the last time that both the Giants and the Jets won on a given NFL weekend. So it's been a really good time to be alive here in New York City. And the Jets, my God, I mean, I am feeling very, very, very confident about our chances this year. And I hate to even say that out loud, but I just did.
I haven't brought this up yet. The Red Sox are destined not to enjoy this, but who do the Yankees want to play?
Well, they don't want to play anybody, right? They've got a big series coming up against the Orioles, so they need to get that first round bye. But the one team that they don't want to play is probably the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they look good. Twins look very
But,
good.
the Yankees have their numbers, so, I mean, I'm not afraid of the Twins. Yeah, right. Maybe they want to play the Twins.
3 games against the dreaded Chicago White Sox.
Oh, come on. I want to see it happen.
It's a glorious time of year for sports, and we'll have as much coverage as we can of that and the joy of the season. Futures up 8. Dow futures up 23. The VIX 16.49. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures, but high levels before the bell, and this after the Fed's half-point rate cut last week. Now, in an essay, Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis President Neil Kashkari, he said he backs another 0.5 percentage point of interest rate reductions this year. So we have S&P futures up about 0.1%, 7 points, 5,769. Dow futures little changed at 42,467. NASDAQ futures up about 0.2% at 20,069. We have the two-year yield at 3.57%. That's down 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 3.75%, and that's up 1 basis point. To currencies, we have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger. We have euro, British pound weaker, Bitcoin up nearly 0.5% at around 63,000. Few stocks on the move. Palantir down more than 1%. Raymond James, they cut its rating to market perform from outperform. And then finally, social media platform Pinterest up more than 2%. It's on a buy rating. Inflation from Deutsche Bank. It says it can attract an affluent user base. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Damian Sassower with us. Let's take 2 precious minutes here. On renminbi, 7.XX down to 7.05.
Yeah.
Stronger yuan. What is the 6.99 print signal to Beijing?
Well, I think it's a funding currency, right? So you look at the Taiwan dollar and the Japanese yen, you look at some of these other Asian currencies like the Korean won, the Philippine peso, and really the China yuan, the move doesn't look as big. But the reality is it's all on a relative basis. And now we have rate differentials with the U.S. kind of trending, at least on an inflation-adjusted basis, at a very wide point. Plenty of room for the PBOC and Peng Gongsheng, the PBOC governor, to cut rates here. But we are, we've been waiting for that for so long, and the stimulus just has been lacking.
What's holding them back to cutting rates?
It's austerity. It's the fiscal situation. They've got a lot of debt outstanding. Obviously, so they can't really inject credit as they probably could in years past without, doing further damage to the currency and to the economy, Tom. So I think that's really weighing heavy on the minds of the PBOC.
Is a great distinction here with Georgieva joining us at the Plaza Hotel tomorrow and through the week. Is the distinction here is the IMF the China cannot call on the IMF like other countries.
Well, that's true. I don't think it needs to call on the IMF, though, Tom. And I think Georgieva basically is looking to China for, a little bit of ancillary stimulus for the broader emerging market complex. At least that's what I'm looking for, right? If you look at some of these commodity producers like Brazil, South Africa, Chile, you name it, we are all waiting for China to come back online, and they have not. And so, I think that kind of hangs over the hearts and the minds of the IMF as well.
We'll have to see.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
And the front pages of the Lisa Mateo Hour, brought to you by Interactive Brokers Portfolio Analysts. Consolidate and analyze all your financial accounts on one powerful dashboard for free. Sign up for Portfolio Analyst at ibkr.com/free PA. One more time, ibkr.com/free FREEPA. Lisa, what do you have?
Okay, so we know the NFL played its first regular season game in Brazil, right, earlier this month. You had the Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. It was September 6th, but this weekend, the Journal actually had a write-up where they spoke with fans, and they tried to get reaction from it because this is huge soccer country, right? Okay, so a lot of people there, they described the game as this confusing, slow-moving match by men dressed as astronauts. They didn't really kind of understand it. But the fans were excited. I mean, they turned up about 10 hours before kickoff. Yeah. So that was some of the things they did.
Is the London football worked?
Well, it certainly has. And for all our listeners down in Sao Paulo and Rio, I will be in town from the 12th to the 18th of October. So if you need any help learning how to enjoy the game of American football, I will be there. I will be on hand. And look, it's not all about Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady anymore, right? There's bigger issues at large here. Can't wait to get down there and visit our friends.
What's a bigger issue at
Taylor
large?
Swift is the bigger issue.
Taylor Swift.
Bruno Mars is coming down to Sao Paulo. No, but it's the bigger issue is the New York Jets. The New York Jets look great, and for our friends in Brazil, we like to wear green. I know they're not the Corinthians.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, next. When are you going to be in Brazil?
12th to the 18th.
12th to the 18th.
My mom's going to come with me also. She's going to come to some client
road
meetings.
Trip.
Yeah.
Mrs. Sassower is aware of this?
My mother, she's 70-something years old. We're going to get her on a plane. We're going to get her down there. She's never been. Should be fun.
Excellent. Okay. You're a little mama's
Save
boy.
us,
I
Lisa.
love it.
Next.
Okay, we've been talking about the commute in the city, right? Nightmare this week. The best city for commuters. Wall Street Journal came out with it. So it asked people, what's more important to you when it comes to commute? Is it time or cost? Think about it. What's more important? So a lot of people said it's their time that counts more. Columbus, Ohio, Memphis, Tennessee, Milwaukee, some of the fastest commutes, about 22 minutes one way. That's what it takes. Fort Worth, Texas, Detroit average about 27 miles an hour. But some cities have a lot of faster routes. They say it's just the well-run public transit system.
Does everybody understand I'm hardwired that you have the worst commute of the year every day? Because we find, folks, a correlation of our glorious ratings to length of commute is tangible.
I think we can't ignore the fact there's going to be a lot more listeners on Apple CarPlay for us today because UN Week is a nightmare for commuters here in the city of New York. And unfortunately, I drove in today, so it's going to be a long trip
home. You got to take the train.
I know. It's too early. The trains don't run that early.
My record, folks, and this was to go to an international relations meeting at Michael's restaurant over, Center West Side. I had to take 3 cabs once. You take the cab, you're stuck. You pay the cab, you get out, you walk 2 blocks, get another cab, go, and it was just,
Who are the worst commutes? Forget about the best. Who are the worst commutes? It's got to be New York, right?
Yeah, I was about to say New York City.
Next, what do you got?
Okay, so we were talking about tech jobs not too long ago, but they're saying millennials are even getting too old to land those tech jobs. Tech workers under 25 becoming more common. The portion of workers older than 40 is shrinking, so they're looking for that younger worker.
Why? Is there a why?
14 years old?
They're saying they're just more adverse to everything that's going on, right, about AI. They're just saying the younger generation is a little bit more in tune with tech than the older generation, but we shall see.
My brother, who's done better than me, is a mentor to young techie types.
Okay.
And it's sort of like the one of my book of the summer, Chip Wars. There's no institutional understanding of how Taiwan Semiconductor or Intel happened. And my brother's employed as a fossil to help the young crew that you're talking about. To actually, they don't know what COBOL is or Fortran.
Well, I can say this. I may be 50 years old, but my artificial intelligence bot looks like he's 19, sounds like he's 19. He is a stud, and I think he can get a job working for some big tech.
You have a bot at home?
You don't have a bot? Of course you do. You haven't been machine learning a bot all this time, like your own little personal Jarvis that talks to you and takes out the garbage and does all the things you need, orders your coffee for you, coffee and water, as you will.
Do you have Alexa?
I do have Alexa. Everyone has Alexa.
You're making me sick.
Everyone has Alexa, of course.
I don't have Alexa.
It's on your phones, guys. Everyone has Alexa. I mean, I don't use it, but
I had Alexa for 3 days. I opened the door and there's 4 bags of Purina dog chow. And Vet Bill's ordering this stuff.
I got to tell you guys, you should watch out for this scam. We have been getting all these deliveries from Amazon, right? And we like, where'd they come from? They're not showing up on our orders. We were told that those are people who are ordering stuff so that when you scan the QR code to return it, it gets all your information off your phone. So I guess the dirty little secret is if you have all this stuff coming in from Amazon that you didn't order, just take it and use it because you can't return it. Isn't that wild?
One more, Lisa.
Anyway, sorry.
Quick.
No. Oktoberfest kicked off in Germany, okay? But the Associated Press, they said the world's oldest brewery, they spoke with it. A lot more people are going for non-alcoholic beers. That's the new trend at Oktoberfest. All but 2 of the large 18 tents of that festival offer the drink. It's a 16-day celebration, but here's the thing. It's not cheaper. It's the same price as the regular priced beer, but you just won't get the hangover. But it's the first time that an alcohol-free beer garden opened in Munich. So Oktoberfest starting.
Have you ever been to the Hofbräuhaus in Munich?
It's un-American.
The beer hall
I've been to the
Hofbräuhaus?
Hofbräuhaus in New York.
Well, there's one in
I don't
Munich,
have
the original.
your life.
Or the Augustiner Brau in Vienna. Let me tell you, in Salzburg, let me tell you something about these beer houses. There's dark and there's light. There's no alcohol free there. So, I'm going to cast shade on that story. I mean, who is drinking alcohol free beer for lunch? I mean, when you can have a, nice Coca-Cola or something sweet.
I did see an article in the Zeitgeist where they're trying to shrink the size of the glass in British pubs. They're trying to make
the price
serve
shrinking?
You like a schooner. Yeah, exactly. But
apparently, Tim Stanovic likes alcohol-free beer.
We say thank you to Lisa Mateo for the newspapers.
Thank you, Lisa.
This morning. Futures up 10, they advance. Dow futures up 26. Just real simple. There's a lot going on. We're thrilled you're with us. We're doing San Francisco songs today for Christian McCaffrey. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love.
is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
We're addicted to the parlor game, the Fed, the monetary ballet.
Where do you see opportunities in that fixed income space here in 24?
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
Another legal setback for Donald Trump, this time across the pond.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. Sweeney on sabbatical. Joining us this morning, Damian Sassower. In moments, David Gurrow will be with us. But we've got Damian here, and this is a good thing after a 50 beep cut with emerging markets really roaring. Let's touch on that right now. Weak economic data out of Europe in the last 12 hours. I mean, it just flat out, it's not there. Do you shift now and just presume Europe catches up with the rate cuts of the Fed?
You know, it's funny because when we think of emerging market currencies, we kind of tend to group it all at once. But really, there are high yielders and there are low yielders, meaning there are emerging market economies whose yields are double digits like Brazil and Mexico, and there are ones whose yields are in like 0.0 land, which are like China, Taiwan, and the rest. And I think that's where the divide is, Tom. You know, if you have a Fed that's basically cutting aggressively, that's good for these low yielders, these funding currencies like the Asian bloc. But if you have them, you know, kind of not, you're going to see, you know, in a risk-on behavior off the back of it, you're going to see the high yielders out of LatAm outperform.
I've said this on air. I'll say it again. The unknown out there, good morning, Dr. Elarian, is the assumption of resilient dollar. Do you just assume weak dollar vector right now?
Well, I think there's more runway for the dollar to decline, certainly, but I wouldn't be playing that because there is a lot of geopolitical risk. There's an election coming up, as David Gurrow will attest to, and, you know, these are all very big events, and we have a lot of uncertainty surrounding the payroll print and, quite frankly, what the Fed's going to do at its next meeting. A lot of uncertainty.
Good morning, everyone. On your commute, and then switch over to YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. We are thunderstruck by the success of this project in your living room, at your office, YouTube. A real commitment by Bloomberg Radio worldwide, truly worldwide. Good evening. I said Shibuya. I've been there, actually. It's a part of Tokyo.
Okay.
It's where the Prime Minister of Japan's from. Oh. Francine Lacroix in conversation tomorrow with the Prime Minister. Good morning, Tokyo.
Hi.
This morning. From New York now, from the Interactive Broker Studios with our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. We've got green on the screen as traders looking to speeches from Federal Reserve officials, fresh insight on the pace of policy easing. Today we'll hear from regional presidents Raphael Bostic and Austin Goolsbee. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 20,068. We have Dow futures little changed at 42,466, and S&P futures up about 0.1% at 5,769. The two-year yield at 3.57%. That's down 2 basis points. The yield on the 10-year 3.75%. And that is little changed. Companies making news. UniCredit raised its stake in Commerce Bank to 21%, and that comes just days after the German government said that it opposes a takeover of the lender. Citigroup facing fines from the Federal Reserve for its data management risk controls in the U.S., and that could really affect its expansion plans in China. And finally, luxury stocks taking a hit. LVMH ADR is down more than 3%. Analysts from Bank of America, they cut their rating to neutral, downgraded others in the luxury sector, including Kering and also Hugo Boss. Checking in with the CAC in Paris right now, down about 0.1%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, we're brought to you by CohnReznick Advisory, Assurance Tax. Discover optimization strategies that are helping CFOs make their finance function more competitive, more resilient. Talk to CohnReznick's advisors. CohnReznick, CohnReznick. CohnReznick, a foundational supporter of what we do here. Okay, November 5th, not 10 p.m., but more like midnight, 1 a.m. I'm focused on Hayden, Arizona. The average home in Hayden, Arizona is $41,900. It's like 112% Democrat. That's the foundation of Democrats in Arizona, David Gurrow, isn't it? Small towns like this, and maybe bolt on Tucson as well.
Are we getting some insight into your retirement thinking here? Arizona?
Yeah,
That's what
Sweeney's in Scottsdale. I just want to live down the street from Sweeney in Scottsdale. But, I mean, Arizona is a complete mystery to animals like me.
Yes, and it's going to be crucial. We've talked about it on the show before. This is a state that Joe Biden won last time around. Obviously, Kamala Harris wants to win again. And today we get this latest poll from the New York Times and Siena College focusing on these three pivotal swing states, Arizona among them, Georgia and North Carolina the others. And some worrisome signs, I think, for the Harris campaign. She trailing Donald Trump there. And look, all of these polls are close to or within the margin of error, so we should take that into consideration. But I think she's hoping to regain this ground and, of course, win that state. And where we are now in this campaign, with just a few weeks to go, is kind of looking at the calculus that each campaign is making about how to get to that electoral college win in Arizona would be critical.
Can Walz help her there with the VP debate coming up?
You know, this is going to be a very closely watched vice presidential debate. Because people don't know these candidates well. I mean, I think that we've gotten to know J.D. Vance since he's been named.
Yeah, but I didn't know Spiro Tiagna.
Well, fair enough. But I think
it's better to bust Gur's chops.
It's better to bust my chops on a Monday than anything else. I know. But look, Tim Walz, governor from Minnesota, had a fairly large profile among governors, leading the Democratic Governors Association. But a lot of people still don't know him. He is a great speaker. I say that no matter what your political stripes, I think you can agree. He's not somebody who's wedded to a teleprompter, and I think hasn't done a debate the likes of which he's going to do here on October the 1st. So I think people will be watching just to see, A, how he handles it, B, how he handles it against the junior senator from Ohio.
David, we had Henrietta Treyz of Veda Partners on earlier, and she felt that among those 7 swing states, Roe versus Wade, abortion was going to be the primary, kind of talking point. That's what's in focus. That's what means the most to voters. Do you believe that?
I think it's true. I think that we're seeing the Harris campaign go all in on that. But here's the caveat. Looking at the other polling that we've gotten recently, particularly the NBC News one, the issue that most voters say they care about is the economy, inflation, feeling like there is still difficulty there. And you look at the week ahead for both of these candidates, they're going to talk about the economy. We heard from Kamala Harris this weekend. She was here in New York for a high-profile, high-dollar fundraiser that she gave here in the city. This is what she said she's going to talk about this week. Donald Trump saying the same thing. We're seeing speeches in Michigan and Georgia. So that's where they need to focus, and I think what people care about.
Well, Tom opened us up here talking about Scottsdale, Arizona. Do we really believe that in Scottsdale, Arizona, voters care more about Roe v. Wade than they do about immigration and their own, pocketbooks? I mean, I don't know if I believe that.
They still, I think both campaigns still acknowledge the fact that women voters are going to be critical here, and what the Harris campaign is betting on is that this is going to be the issue that motivates women in particular to get to the polls. Some men as well, of course, but and that dovetails with the economy. There are sort of economic motivations for reproductive rights as well for some of these voters. So I think the overall umbrella is economic issues, but this is one part of that.
Well, Dave, I know they got you with a full slate here this week with the UN General Assembly here in New York City.
Yeah,
so talk to us a little.
Expanding out to 25 hours.
I mean, talk to us a little bit about where you're going to be dining this
week. I got to
week.
guarantee that.
What kind of lunch meetings do you have? Where are you going to be eating? No, I mean, talk to us about talk to us about Iran. I mean, we're going to see the new reformist president making his debut, as well as Biden's probably last speech to the General Assembly. Talk to us about what's got your focus here.
Going to flag a piece by a competitor here, and that's Jonathan Lemire of Politico out with a piece on Joe Biden's foreign policy perspective. And his goal here in the waning days of his presidency was to get a ceasefire deal, and it seems like from John's reporting that's looking less and less likely. So this is a last-ditch effort that he's going to make here, speaking to this international body. And I think we have to remember that this is Joe Biden's bread and butter. He is somebody who is on the Foreign Relations Committee, cares so much about this. This is a success that he desperately wants to have and where he wants his focus to be here going forward.
Isn't Lemire a Red Sox fan?
He is. I see him at Little League games in Prospect Park wearing that Boston Red Sox hat.
He's wearing that Red Sox hat.
Yes.
His kids are.
I've only seen it on you and him.
His kids
I feel so bad for his kids. I feel so bad.
His kids are draped in Red Sox merch, right?
Yes. I mean, every time I see him.
It's embarrassing, particularly when they're playing 500 ball.
His kids can spell Yastrzemski.
Yeah, that's true. We say good morning to Mr. Lemire, holding court at 5 a.m. on a different network. But that goes to the point. Let me end there, David, because I think it's important. How does the media address this? I guess the focus is the VP debate, but then what? There's this gap, this interregnum.
There is this gap, and the Harris campaign would like to fill it with another debate, and there was a little exchange
23rd.
over the weekend on the 23rd of October. She said, happy to do it. CNN's going to do it. We've agreed to these ground rules before. Donald Trump was in Wilmington, North Carolina. He says the calendar is too short at this point. There's no time to get this debate.
But isn't that like a gift for her to do like a pseudo one-person debate? Everybody's screaming they want to hear from her. So that's a gift. Show up at the debate alone.
She could certainly do that. perhaps she will. This is something that Donald Trump has done over and over again, this sort of town hall format. If she could go ahead and do that, I'm sure CNN would be happy to oblige and have her there on the stage with or without him.
Mrs. Gura emails in and says, how's the commute today? I mean, what do you do to get to Brookburg?
Yes.
On a UN day? Did you swim?
Yeah, right. Take the ferry. No, I will brave the train.
Oh.
And when I took it, I came in early today. I took a car, and I saw a lot of sirens and lights, but there was still none of the clogged arteries in Manhattan that I'm sure you'll fit. What are you going to walk, Tom? Oh, your scooter. You'll take the electric scooter.
Right, no,
Sorry.
right, no.
He
He gets the longboard out. He gets the longboard out with the hoodie. He's skating in.
Sweeney, let me have.
Bar the Vespa.
The Vespa.
Get those
The
CCs
Vespa
roaring.
is
Yeah. Where is he by the? Oh, he's in Scottsdale. He said.
No. That's where it's got a second house there.
I see, of course.
He just bought a house there, like 4,000 square feet or something. No, he's in Europe somewhere. He's like smarter than we are.
Paul would have taken a city bike in.
He takes all my Paul takes all my vacation days. And it's like,
it's nice that you offer them.
Mine too.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
We'll have to see. Futures up 9. David Gura, thank you.
See you tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow?
We're at the UN. Can I get the bar?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, thank you very much.
New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. The Israeli military says it struck 300 targets in Lebanon today, killing at least 100 people, according to the Lebanese Health Ministry, as Israel edges closer to an all-out war with Hezbollah. Rosalind Matheson is Bloomberg's news director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa.
Hezbollah, has a lot of missiles and a lot more manpower than Hamas arguably does. And so they're a much bigger threat potentially to Israel in the longer term. So getting them back from the border is really important. But at some point to do that, do you have to send Israeli troops over the border into Lebanon? And that's really a ground war at that point, a full-blown war. And that's what everyone is worried might start to happen, is inevitably, are you going in that direction?
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson reporting. The Middle East will likely be a topic at the UN General Assembly that will go through this week in New York City. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby talked about attempts to find a diplomatic solution to the escalating tensions.
We have been involved in extensive and quite assertive diplomacy. We will certainly keep up those conversations as best we can, and we're talking to both sides here.
Kirby spoke on ABC's This Week, heard Sundays on Bloomberg. Tomorrow, President Biden will speak at the UN. Congressional leaders have a deal on a short-term spending bill that will fund federal agencies for about 3 months. The agreement, announced Sunday, averts a possible partial government shutdown when the new budget year begins October 1st and pushes final decisions until after the November election. House Speaker Mike Johnson dropped his plan to link temporary funding with a mandate that would have compelled states to require proof of citizenship when people register to vote. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thank you so much. Bloomberg Business and Sports. Damian Sassower, Michael Barr, and SFU drops by as well. Are we finally streaming NFL football this year without complaining? Has there been a change?
Well, I'm streaming it. I'm not saying I'm not complaining about it.
That's exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. We're streaming, but we are complaining. It's not
November
easy to find
10th,
a game.
I mean, this is from the Detroit Free Press. Lions versus Texans on Peacock. Really?
Yeah, I have to, you see, that's the problem. You know I'm going to watch it, and then they know I'm going to pay for it, and that's the problem. That's where I'm like, come on, guys. This used to be free
It's
TV.
So odd. I'm such an outlier. I'm watching baseball on Sunday afternoon.
You're not an outlier.
No, I think so.
You're not watching F1, though.
Football's taking over. Futures up 7. Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We do have some modest gains on Wall Street with indexes hovering near record highs, and this is after the Fed's rate cut last week. Now, the Fed's Raphael Bostic, he talked about it today, saying that starting the central bank's cutting cycle with a big move will help bring interest rates closer to neutral levels, but added that the pace is still not set. NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 20,075. We have Dow futures little change at 42,464, and S&P futures up 0.1% at 5,769. We have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up about 0.2% at around 63,000. Shares of Intel up nearly 5%. Sources saying Apollo Global Management, it's offered to invest as much as $5 billion in Intel. And this comes as rival Qualcomm reportedly makes an approach about a takeover. And the Wall Street Journal reporting Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing, Samsung, they have both discussed more than $100 billion of projects for chip factories in the UAE. That's in the coming years. And finally, this new Bloomberg News analysis, it shows Novo Nordisk weight loss drugs Ozempic, Wegovy on track to make $65 billion by the end of this year. And that is a sign that the drugs don't need to be priced as high as they are to offset research spending. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Curve steepening here, right through zero, 17 basis points, really extending out back to a normal yield curve. When was the last time I said that? Nixon was president. 10-year yield higher, 1.60% as well. Okay, what was the single number one thing I heard last week in the blur? Somebody asked me Friday at lunch. I was on the second beverage.
Real rates.
And they asked me, real rates is always my number one thing. But the greatest insight I heard, and this is bouncing off the weaker EU economic data today, is Anna Wong, who's clearly in the running for Economist of the Year, Bloomberg Economics, said, look, the 3-month moving average of non-farm payrolls is 116. She's calculating a $91,000 person adjustment per month, which gets you down to a really soggy payroll growth. That means a lot of Fed rate cuts. Joining us now, Megan Horniman, Verdant's Capital, to bring economic babble over to investment. Megan, just perfect timing having you here today. If we get Dr. Wong's labor market, if we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever more rate cuts, what does the stock market do?
I think it's gonna really depend on what's going on in the underlying economic fundamentals. So that's where we have to bring this, the economy back into this. The labor market was one of the last things standing, and obviously they cut interest rates because they're concerned about the labor market. But there's a lot of other economic fundamentals that really aren't pointing to this perfect scenario or this perfect soft landing. I think the markets themselves, though, are getting way too complacent on the fact that the Fed can orchestrate this perfect soft landing from an economic standpoint. And lastly, from the investment side, the earnings aren't reflecting any of this economic data that we see. That's what's concerning to us, and that's where we think that the market still could be in for another correction here.
Atlanta GDP, the snapshot of where we are right now, Damian Sassower, 2.93%, and a number of houses have really reaffirmed 2.9-ish, 3% growthiness for Q3.
Yeah.
So I guess the slowdown is out there somewhere.
Well, that's my question. I mean, and
that's a James Ingram song.
Well, Megan, that's my question for you. I mean, it's a simple one. What's the rush? Why did the Fed feel the need to go 50? What is the rush?
Right. And that's where, you got that a lot of people talking before they did that if they were going to go 50, that the market wouldn't like it because they saw something that we don't see. I agree completely. I don't understand the rush. I don't understand the aggressiveness of the 50 basis points. I guess when you've raised so much, 25 basis points wouldn't really make an impact. But we cannot forget what is still out there, and that's inflation.
Right.
Yes, it's coming down. It's coming in the right direction, but there's a lot of pockets of inflation inflation, specifically services, these are still running 4.5%, 5% on a year-over-year basis. That's a concern that we have, and that's something that I think the Fed has to be very careful. They're walking a very, very fine line. Money supply is still high. The Fed balance sheet is still high. These things can very easily reignite inflation. And what concerns me is they said this repeatedly, that they don't want to stop and go type of policy. And by doing what they did and doing it so quickly and completely ignoring the fact that inflation's still here, that I think is going to, they're going to may live to regret this a little bit.
Megan, and I hate to sound like Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge here, but I mean, is there a political component to this? I mean, do you think the Fed moved 50 because they're trying to offset?
I want to go a conspiracy theorist.
I have to ask, because I've asked this question to so many people over the last few days, and everyone kind of rolls back to the same thing. We can't understand why the Fed did this risk management 50 bip cut unless there was a political undertone to it all. Do you agree with that, Megan?
Yeah, I'm gonna choose not to agree with the conspiracy theories when it comes to the politics. I'm gonna hope that the Fed is doing. I think what spooked the Fed was that recent the report about the jobs that the revisions to the jobs and how the job market hasn't been as strong as we had thought. So I think that spooked them. I think that's why they did it. But what I don't understand is why, if you go 50, why is the market still pricing in that this is the start of this? We're going to get back down to 3.5% or something. I mean, what is the rush there? That's my concern.
I got to lay out the geometry here. And the headline this morning is Neil Kashkari, the Minnesota Fed, modeling another 50 beep cut. That's a big headline, and that sounds like the aerospace engineer from Caltech, I believe it is. I mean, I get it. But Megan, the bottom line is, from zero interest rates up to the peak, if we come halfway back, I model it out as 8, 9, 10 rate cuts. Don't they cut rates here with no harm to the economy and the financial system for at least 1-ish, 2-ish, 3-ish rate cuts?
Yeah, I think that if they want to, let's take a step back and pause. Let's take a look at what the 50 basis points does. Like, why are we already pricing another one in November, then another one in December, and then multiple next year? Let's take a step back and see, does the 50 basis points help anything? Does it help housing? Does it help the consumers that are just drowning in debt right now? What does it do? And then take a step back, please, and see what it does to inflation. I mean, obviously, the equity markets liked it, so you still do have asset inflation here that you're seeing with the rally in the market. So you have to be really careful. What is the rush that they feel like inflation is completely behind us? I just don't. That concerns me.
Right. Fabulous. Megan Horniman, thank you so much. Verdant's Capital. Really appreciate it. I love what she's doing. Really clear notes. See her notes at Verdant's Capital. Damian, I want to go to you on this because I think it's really important. You're the global travel. You're in Sao Paulo when?
March 12th to the 18th, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you go to Asia 8 times a year and all that. We are thunderstruck by the reach of YouTube internationally. Yeah. Describe that to you with your global travels. What is it? That's all they got?
Well, no. YouTube is really important because it allows you to not only watch sporting events like the NFL, but it also allows you to really watch a lot of great vignettes about, real life lore and a lot of the stuff. Kings and Generals, a lot of the shows that I like to watch. You can't find that on television
and
anymore.
People like in the Philippines are watching,
and they're watching it too, of course. Yeah,
they're watching celebrity stuff. And
they're watching Fed meetings. They're watching Jerome Powell talk. They're watching it all, and they're watching it on YouTube TV.
Over the media of all the places you're traveling?
Well, it's interesting, and especially when you talk about media in Brazil, Tom. I mean, don't get me there about O Globo and some of the polls and some of the stuff that goes on down there. So I'm actually really excited to go down there and kick tires, see what really has changed. I mean, Geraldo Calero, our head of sales down in Sao Paulo, I'm going to be spending a lot of time glued to him, seeing what our clients are looking for here from, both Bloomberg and from, quite frankly, the United States writ large.
I got Brazilian real out to new real weakness here. I mean, we're back over 5.
Well, they're hiking. I mean, it's a normally upward sloping curve now. The Bank of Brazil has hiked rates. They are in a tightening cycle. So talk about divergence. Talk about idiosyncratic risk. I mean, look to Brazil. They're hiking and the Fed is cutting.
From 2010, they've had a huge depreciation of the real. But what do they do here at 5.56? Can you say strong Brazilian real?
I think the Brazilian real has room to strengthen from current levels. Sure. I mean, they've been in the mire for a long time. And look, I mean, it's different than Mexico, right? Mexico is going to be cutting rates. They're meeting this week on Thursday. Tom, we got a CPI print right ahead of it. I mean, I believe Banxico's probably going to start cutting.
CPI.
Yeah, exactly. And so, look, I mean, there's a lot going on there. So, a lot to unpack in the LATAM region.
And of course, Damian will travel there to give you a surveillance exclusive. We'll be sure to get him from some bar in Sao Paulo.
I won't be calling in.
You won't be calling in. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen after last week's 50 basis point rate cut. Now this week, traders watching for the Fed's preferred price metric and data on U.S. personal spending and income for more clues on the strength of the economy. Today, We have a read on manufacturing and services. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.2% at 20,083. We have Dow futures little change at 42,468, and S&P futures up 0.1% at 5,771. We have the 2-year yield at 3.58%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year 3.76%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, spot gold higher at $2,622 an ounce. We have Brent crude lower at $74 a barrel. WTI crude at $71 a barrel. Companies making news. General Motors, they say they will temporarily lay off 2/3 of the workers at its Fairfax assembly plant in Kansas. It's basically getting that facility ready to begin production of the next Chevy Bolt model. And speaking of EVs, Bloomberg reporting thieves, they're vandalizing EV charging stations. They're on the hunt for copper, which the cords are made of. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Let me rip up the script right there. Damian Sassower out on the climbs where the leaves turn color before they do in Central Park. Can you get your electric vehicle car charged?
Well, it's interesting. I'm not an electric vehicle believer, but I mean, they have a car charging station right outside of my home at the park at Crawford Park in Rybrook, New York. I'm telling you, I mean, it is packed all the time. Guys need to go there. I mean, and then I have friends, obviously, who have bought all the equipment to charge it in their garage, and they have problems with that. So I guess these charging parks are real. I guess you have to go there to get some juice.
It reminds me of the railroads. Like I'm thinking 1890, where you're trying to figure
Were you there
out
at 1890?
I was there. It was very great. Steam engines and all that. But, I look at it and I go, horse before the cart and all that. And I guess we'll get it solved.
Yeah, no, I guess so. I mean, I don't remember the horse before the cart kind of situation, Tom, but you do, obviously. So, yeah, I mean, I guess these electronic cars thing is real.
Well, Grandpa was Augustus Caesar there, so it worked out. I got a mortgage rate from 8% down to 6.64. What are you observing on the day-to-day at the Sassower house? Is there a renewed frenzy in housing?
In housing in Westchester? Well, look, my wife and I are very focused on the Fed median dot for the end of 2025 because it's calling for a Fed funds rate of 3 3/8. And let's just be clear, Tom, that means a mere 150 basis points below the current rate. I mean, there's 10 meetings between now and the end of next year. I mean, how much cutting can they possibly do? How many 50s can they possibly deliver? My wife and I are suspect.
You're suspect.
We're suspect.
Yeah. But I'm absolutely fascinated emotionally. 2007, 2008, you were joining a 6% mortgage rate. You had a long-term moving average of 5.95%. We're basically 60% back to that benchmark pre-Great Financial Crisis. Is it like a spigot goes off at 5.9% mortgage?
I think housing's a supply issue right now. It's a supply story. I mean, there's not a lot of it, right? So if you do sell your home, where are you going?
Spades.
I mean, where are you going? That's the big question that we witness. I think in our little metro, New York metro area market is, if you're going to sell, where are you going to move to? I mean, there's just not a lot of supply out there, and until that changes, I can see rates going down, and there may be some refis, but there's not going to be a lot of movement.
Question that we'd ask Shonali Bassick. She's really wired into this. I'm of the belief with the election, and maybe with some of the proclivities of private equity and private credit, that the right sizing of Wall Street that usually occurs December, January, before Bonai season, maybe it's all going to be early this year. What are you hearing on New York Wall Street about right sizing forward?
I'm not hearing that much. I mean, we got to look, though. I mean, M&A volumes have picked up like crazy, especially on the fixed income side. At least that's what I'm hearing now that the Fed started cutting here. So, if we continue to see a lot of paper hitting the market, a lot of new issuance, I mean, it should be a good bonus season for Wall Street, and that will trickle down into, the local real estate market. But, that remains to be seen. It wasn't a really great start to the year, so I don't know what bonus.
It's caught up.
It's catching up, I think, is the right way to put it.
I mean, it's overwhelming. Or Qualcomm, and of course, with all the gossip of Intel, Robert Schiffman out with definitive work. We're trying to talk to his people about getting Schiffman on Wednesday. We'll see if we can do
Schiffman needs
that.
to work on his putting.
Well, yeah, he does. I mean, that's beside. Is that where he is? He said he's a little busy.
Schiffman and I had a client meeting last week. We definitely hit the links a little bit, and he's a good player. He used to be a member of St. Andrews out in Westchester, but no longer, and so his putting has suffered as a result.
It is. His game has gotten shaky. Qualcomm, 6% debt. So there's somebody there that could issue a pile of debt. They literally could acquire Intel.
I wonder how many points JP Morgan's going to make, though, on that issue. I mean, everybody wants Qualcomm. Is it anything special that, I mean, that's the thing. I think with all these new issues that are coming to market, Tom, just how are the investment banks getting paid?
Joining us now, someone absolutely brilliant on piecing together Y = C + I + G + NX. Stephen Stanley joins us from Santander. I looked up on a map where Santander is. It's on the northern shore of Spain, on the Mediterranean. I did not know that. It's like an ancient city. It's like, old Spain. It's not like condominiums, down south of Seville.
A lot of history, yeah.
Have you gone back to the mother country yet, to Madrid?
So I've been to Madrid, yeah, of course. A huge campus there, beautiful.
Okay, great to have you here today. Steve Stanley, which of the letters in the alphabet soup of GDP are you most focused on right now?
I think you have to be focused on the biggest one, which is C.
Yeah.
Definitely consumption.
Well, what's the dynamic you see right now?
So the consumer was propelled last year by a very strong labor market. So income growth was very strong, and that supported good consumer spending. I think surprised almost everybody on the upside. This year, income growth has slowed as the labor market has cooled, but consumption has continued. So in essence, I would argue consumers are spending a little beyond their means at this point. Savings rate has declined pretty sharply. So I think the consumer is likely to slow down as we move forward, into the fourth quarter and early next year.
So what's your real GDP, nominal GDP view 1 year out?
I think we're going to dip as low as 4% or a little lower for a couple of quarters, and then once
nominal.
On nominal, yeah. And once these Fed cuts start to
Interesting.
kick in later next year, I think we'll start to creep higher again.
Yeah, Damian, this is important. This is something I'm not hearing from a lot of people. We get under 4%.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to be visiting Spain in Christmas, so I'll inform you on Santander and what it's like.
Appreciate that.
So look, let's talk about.
You and I. Wait a minute. You and I, Steve. We live for Sassower's itinerary.
Oh no, stop.
Are you going to spend 5 consecutive days at home?
No, yeah, sure, of course. I love to spend time at home. I mean, but let's get off that, Stephen. I have to ask you. I'm reading your latest note. 10 FOMC meetings between now and the end of next year. The median dot is only 150 basis points below where we are currently.
Yep.
What does that mean? Half of those meetings, they're only cutting by 25. I mean, what does that mean to you?
I think that the idea here, it seems like with this 50 basis point cut, is let's rush at the beginning, get closer to where we think we should be, and then we can slow down as we go forward. Remember, it wasn't so long ago that the dots, as well as the consensus forecasts amongst private economists, had the Fed going just 25 at every other meeting and doing that basically until they got down to 3%ish.
Right.
I think now it feels like we're going to have fast at the beginning, and then we're going to probably devolve back to that by sometime next year.
So does that mean a higher terminal rate in your view, or do you think that we could still see 3%?
No, I think it's between, in my view, neutrals between 3 and 3.5. I think we end the cycle a little above 3, but in that general neighborhood. So they had a little over 200 basis points to go. They just bit off 50 in one bite.
Is the effect to our listeners and viewers linear with those rate cuts, or is there convexity, or is it quadratic in that the more they go, the bigger the wallop?
Yeah, I think it depends on what rates we're talking about that are relevant to consumers. I mean, if you're talking about mortgage rates, which are tied really to the long end of the market, that hasn't moved very much since the meeting. So mortgage rates have been coming off already, but they haven't moved further on the back of this 50 basis point move. If you're talking about credit card rates or other rates that are floating, the immediate impact.
What is business going to do here? Damian just mentioned that M&A is really picking up. There's an animal spirit, I guess, to our nominal GDP, but the 11% whatever of the economy, what does business investment do here?
Yeah, I think certainly rate cuts are going to be cheered. I will say in the short run, I suspect that there's going to be at least some businesses that are sitting on their hands until they see the results of the election. So that is potentially a short-term drag. Although, you mentioned M&A, it may very well be that there are people that want to get their deals done before a new administration comes in, hoping that they can get it approved and get it locked away before there's a potential for a change in regime one way or the other that might affect that.
Stephen, in the 12 months after the Fed first cuts rates, commodities tend to perform really, really well. Do you believe this time the same thing's going to happen, or is this time a little bit different?
Every cycle's a little bit different. I think for commodities generally right now, one of the big fundamentals that people are keeping a close eye on is the Chinese economy. So there's a lot of concern about weakness there. They're obviously the biggest demand source for so many industrial commodities.
So you have to pay attention to China still.
Certainly for commodities, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me give you Dr. Wong's thesis here, as she stated last week. Anna Wong looks at 3-month moving average non-farm payrolls, 116,000. That's squishy with revisions. And then she models in the highly debated birth-death model and all the rest of the noise Stephen Stanley, your expert at. Can you revise down 116 to where this is already a non-farm payrolls report that causes concern?
You can certainly make that assumption. I don't know if you can make it safely. It's not unreasonable, but it's a bit of a risk to extrapolate the downward revisions that we have that go through March of last year forward beyond that. I think it's fair to say that the more than likely the direction of the revisions is negative, but
you don't want to go with magnitude on it.
Pegging a magnitude is
it's all
speculative.
magnitude.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, we have a core PCE print coming in on Friday. The market's looking for, I think, 2.6% or 2.7%. I think we were 2.6 last time. But if you look at, quite frankly, 3 and 6 month run rates, they've slowed materially, and the market's pricing in a softer CPI over the next 12 months. What are your views on inflation here in the U.S.? Do you think it stays sticky at current levels?
Yeah, so I think as it relates to inflation, we've had way too much of just extrapolating the last data point. So we had the second half of last year, core inflation was very low, and everybody came into 2024 just assuming that inflation was dead. Then we had 3 or 4 bad numbers to start the year, and oh wait, inflation is going to be 3% forever. Now we've had a couple of more benign readings, and we're ready to declare victory again. And I think the problem is that a lot of that volatility is coming in some of the most noisy categories, things like used car prices and airfares that you can't extrapolate forward. So I think that the reality is somewhere in between what we saw in the first 4 months of the year and what we've seen since then.
Haven't asked this week. We get so many other distractions going on. How about the real world of the inflation report? I believe we see it on Friday as well. Does that have the opportunity to surprise us, or is it a snooze fest?
Well, it's probably a snooze fest, but I'll tell you so the consensus is 0.2 on the core, but we had Governor Waller, who spoke on Friday, and he said that the Fed staff model is telling them that it's going to be 0.14. Now, the difference between 0.14 and 0.16 in reality isn't that much, but it makes a big difference in the markets because all they see is 0.1 or 0.2.
There's a snapshot into the acuity of Stephen Stanley, award-winning on Wall Street, going out to 2 decimal points. It's like an F1 race or something. First place and second place is 3,000ths of a second or whatever.
It's like Piastri.
Yeah.
Lando Norris, McLaren,
Lando
Red
was
Bull,
killing it this week. I watched
Mercedes.
Singapore. I watched Singapore.
Oh my God, it was so good.
Great.
U.S.
Ricardo
Grand
was
Prix coming up in less than a month. We got Austin, Texas. Are we going?
You're going everywhere else. Why aren't you going to Austin? Steve Stanley, thank you so much for Santander. Faro, Sassower, Austin, soon. Our economic indicators, and it's a busy, busy week of economic indicators. It's brought to you by Commonwealth. Join over 2,000 independent financial advisors. They are taking control of their growth with advisor-centric support, future-ready technologies, growing your own terms with a partner dedicated to your success. Go to commonwealth.com to learn how. We thank Commonwealth at commonwealth.com for all of their support. Stanley lifts the market. Futures up 11 from New York City. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Little movement in futures before the bell. This is after the Fed's half-point rate cut last week. Now, in an essay, Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis President Neil Kashkari said he backs another half percentage point of interest rate reductions this year. So let's get to NASDAQ futures, up 0.2%, but at 20,081. We have Dow futures, little change, up 26 points at 42,469. And we have S&P futures up about 0.1% at 5,771. We have the two-year yield at 3.58%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 3.76%, and that's up 1 basis point. Two currencies, we have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound weaker. We have Bitcoin up about 0.1% at around 63,000. Stocks on the move, Palantir down about 1%. Raymond James cut its rating to market perform from outperform. And then social media platform Pinterest up nearly 3%. It's on a buy rating initiation from Deutsche Bank. It says it can attract an affluent user base. And finally, today is a day New Yorkers can lease an apartment in the former headquarters for Goldman Sachs. It's over at 55 Broad Street, but it's going to cost you about $4,000 a month, 10-foot ceilings, water views, rooftop pool, fitness center, and Tom, a pet washing station. There you go. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
That's brilliant. Who has a pet washing station?
The new building, Goldman Sachs, is now a residential building. So now those apartments will have pet washing stations.
Interesting.
Because you won't have to take it to the groomer anymore. You could do it yourself.
Take it to the groomer. Mayor Adams calls me when I get vet bill and kennel fee groomed. It's such a revenue raise for the city. They have
you could do it yourself. Wouldn't
my word!
Wouldn't you do it yourself? No.
They get bathed frequently. There's no question about that. Bloomberg Surveillance. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We're brought to you by IBKR Financial Advisors. Switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests at ibkr.com/RIA. This is the conversation of the day. I'm going to be serious here, folks. We're making lots of jokes this morning. Daniel Tannenbaum, he's got some fancy title I can't memorize. Global Anti-Financial Crime Practice Leader at Oliver Wyman. But what he really is someone expert on the tensions worldwide. So when you get in an airplane, Dan, right now, are you worried about pagers and walkie-talkies? I mean, the news flow that we've seen out of the Middle East in the last 72 hours is got to be game-changing in your world of sanctions and terror and tension.
Definitely not worried as much about supply chain and pagers. I think you've got certainly a question of resiliency in the supply chain, of how far back do governments need to worry about for the type of infiltration that we saw last week.
Your phone has to be ringing off the hook this morning.
On that, no.
Why not? Why not? I mean, people are like shattered by this.
A lot of what I'm spending time on is helping companies, helping banks mostly figure out how not to be in the middle of these type of issues where they're not going to be found to have been a conduit to a financed placement of certain things in devices that are civilian devices that obviously were used by people who were not having the best intentions.
Can you do that with confidence? Can you do that with Oliver Wyman? Can you say to a given bank, we can help you avoid these heinous transactions?
I think we certainly can help people understand what to look out for, but the environment keeps changing, and that's really the challenge that companies are dealing with today. Is the threat landscape is constantly changing. And sitting in the U.S. for UNGA this week, where you have a number of significant global issues coming to a head, it really makes it that much harder for multinational companies to try and live easily as they execute their business.
Dan, you're head of the anti-financial crime practice at Oliver Wyman. Talk to us about sanctions. Talk to us about U.S. sanctions on, countries not just like, Russia, but also Venezuela. What kind of stands out to you here as we kind of enter into UN week?
Well, I think that's a bit of the question that I'm hearing and that I'm having discussions with people throughout the week is, have U.S. sanctions lost their potency? If I think about before the Iran deal was enacted and then ultimately scrapped, there was a pretty healthy fear in most pockets of the world of being on the wrong side of U.S. sanctions because the fines were substantial. The embarrassment was significant. With Russia, I'm not seeing the same fear. Venezuela, we continue to sanction from a U.S. standpoint. Maduro's still in power. So how do you actually bring the fear factor back to sanctions?
Well, what about the assets we've already kind of taken control of, these Russian assets? I mean, would it scare them more? I mean, would a more useful kind of measure be to, or deterrent, I guess, being to take those assets, sell them, raise proceeds, and give them back to somebody like Ukraine? Is that even in the cards at this point?
It is in the cards, and there's been discussions for the last few months for what to do with the immobilized Russian assets. The challenge, and really what differentiates this Western coalition from Russia, is we do follow the rule of law. It's not quite as simple to simply take the assets and leverage them for reconstruction, regardless of the emotional reality of what we're dealing with.
I mean, buried in the news this weekend, it was I think 3 stories below the Eagles finally getting back on Eagles track. But Dan Tannenbaum, President Biden had a meeting of the Quad with Mr. Modi of India. They're announcing some big splash semiconductor investment. But isn't India one of the greatest violators of our sanctions at the same time?
It is, and the U.S. government has paid a lot of attention to India, the role that it's playing with Russia in continuing to support them. The U.S. exerts pressure on certain Indian banks for facilitating transaction that would be on the wrong side of the Western coalition on sanctions, and that activity stops. But it's a big country, it's a big economy, so it's not quite that simple to cut this off that easily.
Well, I mean, look, we have new Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian. He's going to be speaking to the UN this week. You know, what are your thoughts on Iran here? I mean, what do you expect him to deliver?
So we already saw reports that he's willing to re-engage in negotiations akin to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. He was supportive of it historically in his prior roles. So we may have a scenario where an Iran deal comes back on the table. Obviously, in an election year with some pretty strong views on opposite sides, this could be a real interesting challenge.
Do we have a war on the border of Lebanon? Do you call it a war now, or are we not there yet, Dan Tannenbaum?
I think the term that we're hearing is conflict. Whether to call it a war, it goes beyond my area of expertise.
I got Haifa. I got flames, and given the overlay of, I'm going to go back to where we started, of the last 72 hours, how do you have a normal conversation with Iran at the United Nations meeting? Am I naive on this?
No, I think that's always been the challenge in dealing with Iran, is we know the threats that they're facilitating in the Middle East and other pockets of the world, whether it's supporting Russia. However, you have to try and find a way to negotiate if there's an actual opportunity to get them to de-escalate their nuclear program, for instance. So, I mean, you have to take the bad with the good if you actually have any hope of getting some of these deals across. But that's a very different environment now than it was 6 months ago to hear that Iran is willing to re-engage in nuclear talks.
Well, Dan Tannenbaum, you're an old hand at this, and you know as well as I that there are always 2 UN General Assemblies. There's the official agenda and then the one that everybody's talking about behind the scenes. What's the talk going to be this year?
I do think the focus on U.S. dollar primacy is going to be a big part of the discussions. A lot of where I'm spending time this week on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, not actually on the east side, is going to be a heavy focus on what is the future of the dollar given all of the geopolitical risk lenses, the BRICS that are coming together to try and disintermediate the dollar in their trade. I think that's going to be a very significant part of discussions this week.
In the zeitgeist, is a weak dollar part of the theme?
I don't think a weak dollar is part of the theme. The question is, can countries move off the dollar for global trade where we've not necessarily seen that historically?
Right. Too short. Can you come back another? If you can.
What do you think about that hit on Devontae Smith last night in the Eagles game?
It was a cheap shot. My now 13-year-old daughter was screaming, seeing the cheap shot that he had actually took. So.
Yeah,
Eagles fans, man, Eagles fans.
Do you understand the Eagles' schedule is so light that they could be like 8-1 going into the Bengals here, like 4 or 5 games out?
I'm from Philly. We don't get hope that easily.
It's like the Eagles are playing the Chicago White Sox.
It's an easy schedule till December, frankly.
It's a joke.
I mean, they're going to have Saquon Barkley playing the Giants twice this season. Oh my goodness gracious!
We thank the New York Giants for their contribution to the Eagles this year in Saquon Barkley.
Dan Tannenbaum, Oliver Wyman, thank you so much. Brilliant there. And folks, I really can't say enough. And David Gurr with me tomorrow. David and I will address what we see, the conflict, as they call it, on the Lebanese border. My conflict is what a joy this weekend to listen to Jim Palmer, 79th birthday in October, of the Baltimore Orioles. Thank you, Doug Cast, for that conversation years ago. The Dead.
understand everything. Why they all believe him, he wears a big diamond ring. Run, Alabama, get away, get away. Alabama, get away, get away. Only way to please me, just sit down and leave and walk away.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about the ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo with us today. Michael Barr with us, Sweeney on assignment somewhere in the continent of Europe or maybe a selected island off the coast. Well-deserved for Paul Sweeney.
Well-deserved.
So Damian Sassower sitting in today. David Gura with me tomorrow at the UN meetings at the Park Plaza.
Park City.
Hotel. Yeah, Park City. That would be good. UN meeting at Park City, Utah. That would be different.
And snowboards.
Good morning to all of you. Our congestion correspondent, surveillance congestion correspondent, John Tucker, we're hoping to have a report from him. He's stuck in traffic right now. We'll have to see on that. Damian Sassower holding court this morning. Damian, we're going to get to John Stoltzfus here in the bull market, which John has absolutely nailed. But in your area of foreign exchange and the opportunity there, are there big figure anticipations, or is it basically fight it as you go?
No. We're in the midst of a broken beta regime. This regime is shifting from one that's focused on inflation to one that's focused on growth, and I believe that currencies are caught in the middle of it. And what it's opened the door for is this divergence within each region, across each currency. And so I think the relative value trade is certainly on here, not just dollar versus the rest of the world.
The
opportunity of it, exactly. It's not just about rate differentials anymore, Tom.
Rushir Sharma with a brilliant essay in Foreign Affairs, the three economies making it, EM Switzerland, EM Taiwan, but Vietnam. How do you invest, Damian Sassower, in Vietnam? Equities?
The Vietnamese dong is an illiquid currency. It's not one that is really benchmark eligible at this point in time, so it really doesn't fall into my purview. But certainly Vietnam is in play with all the reshoring of supply chains and logistics. Vietnam's been an economy that's benefited from it, and I'm sure their currency is going to feel the benefit of that as well.
Bloomberg Surveillance this morning. We're brought to you by BAM Mutual. BAM Mutual, they insure municipal bonds that finance essential infrastructure and provide guaranteed income to improve any portfolio. Be part of Building America. Invest in BAM insured bonds. Building America Mutual, BAM insured bonds. We appreciate their support of all we do at Bloomberg Surveillance. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash. El Mateo.
You got it. And we've got a lift to the markets. Traders looking to speeches from Federal Reserve officials for some insight on the pace of policy easing. Now, we had the Fed's Raphael Bostic said that starting the central bank's cutting cycle with that big move, it'll help bring interest rates closer to neutral levels. But he did add that the pace is not yet set. Up to NASDAQ futures, up 0.3%, 68 points at 20,096. We have Dow futures up 0.1% at 42,508, and S&P futures up 0.2% at 5,777. We have the 2-year yield, 3.59%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.77%, and that's up 2 basis points. Companies making news. UniCredit raised its stake in Commerce Bank to 21%. Then you have Citigroup facing fines from the Federal Reserve for its data management risk controls in the U.S., and that could affect its expansion plans over in China. And finally, luxury stocks taking a hit. We have LVMH. Their ADRs down more than 3%. Analysts from Bank of America cut their rating to neutral, also downgraded others in the luxury sector, including Kering and also Hugo Boss. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. Our conversation today on being in stocks. John Stoltzfus has been brilliant at Oppenheimer Company, our chief investment strategist. How has your bullishness changed, John Stoltzfus, from a point south to a point where we are now?
Well, I think the character that's changed very much, of course, is the Fed made its first cut on its benchmark rate since March of 2020, as I recall, which is a dramatic change. And we were expecting 25 bips. They went for 50. And we think that was to accentuate that this is a down payment, is what we've called it. And we're beginning to see others using that term, but we think we were the first. A down payment for Wall Street and Main Street, essentially a message from the Fed. The Fed hike cycle is essentially beginning to end. Here's the first cut.
Damian,
and we think it
yeah, Damian, March of 2020, up 152%. The SPX is up 22% annualized.
Wow. Yeah. No, I mean, John, you have to help me kind of. I'm looking at this week. I'm looking at data on the consumption side. At the end of the week, I'm looking at housing on Wednesday. But, we have a lot of Fed speak. We have Goolsbee, Bostic, Bowman, Kashkari, you name it. I mean, just how focused are you going to be on some of these Fed speakers in the week after the Fed cut?
We certainly will be listening. A lot of our fundamental strategy is based on economic data, not just the view in the rearview mirror, but also what it suggests for going forward and the importance of the opinions within the Federal Reserve. I've been doing this for 41 years now, and I learned early on when Volcker was in his second term that you better understand the Fed and the chair of the Fed if you're going to play in equities or any markets for that matter. But what we'd have to say, Bostic appears to be what we're listening to, and we think this was a reasonable cut, and it had to do with. And the chair has also mentioned that the Fed is focusing on both of its mandates, and this one has to do with jobs. And the jobs were softening. The beige book, the last beige book showed weakness across the regions. I think that was the response that took it to 50 bips. But we think overall it's good for equities. Smalls and mids might actually begin to see sustainable rallies. Not quite yet if we looked at Friday's performance, but let's see what, generally speaking, it looks better for them.
I mean, Stoltzfus is so old. When he entered the market, Bonnie Tyler was on top of Billboard with Total Eclipse of the Heart.
John,
that's how old Stoltzfus is.
John, my question is this. Is this just, Chair Powell, King Dove, dragging the committee members along with him, or do they really have their own opinion in this market? I mean, come on, get real here. I mean, isn't this just Powell?
Oh, I think they all have their own opinions, and if anything, the Bernanke legacy opens it up. So we got all this Fed speak, all these different opinions, but the general opinion seems to be data dependent, data improving. The 2% target is still elusive in terms of the headline number. But where we're headed to is a better situation because the Fed has been vigilant. Yeah. It really has been, while remaining remarkably sensitive to its dual mandate and the effects both in terms of delay and the effects
Right.
that it has on both jobs and borrowing costs.
Tape recorder's running, John Stoltzfus. Where are we 12 months from now? Frame out the stock market out 1 year.
Already, Tom, I usually prefer to do that in December but then, and this year will be beyond the election. But I would suspect likely higher, as long as we don't get what Barton Biggs in the old days would have called a bolt from the blue or a sock to the jaw. We'd have to think that things are just basically improving. If we can just keep it moderate growth with resilience in jobs and economic growth and corporate earnings, I think we're good to go, as long as we avoid getting complacent and as long as we can avoid having the bolt from the blue hit us. I think considerably higher and well beyond the 5,900 target, probably.
John, just how focused...
This year,
I'm curious, just how focused are you on what's going on outside of the U.S.? I mean, we've got other central bank meetings, Mexico, Switzerland, Sweden, Australia this week. Are you focused on any of that, or are they all just following the Fed?
Oh, most certainly. Well, we're globalists, and we take a look at the ECB and the problems they have within their multinational economy, the things that are occurring in post-Brexit UK, and what's going on in Asia around China, as well as Xi Jinping's regime. And what we do see is really a mix and match in some ways, but overall, a desire to bring rates down, but in some cases, it's just it's still a little bit too early, and
Right.
in other cases, maybe they're behind the curve a bit.
John Stoltzfus, quickly here on Mag 7, what do you see?
I see the Mag 7 continuing to be have a good place on stage, but sharing the spotlight with other sectors. When it comes to artificial intelligence, it's already here. What comes in the future, all the Star Trek kind of stuff, there I'm showing my age again, or the Star Wars, still showing my age again. But my point is, essentially, it's a reality today. It makes businesses more efficient. All 11 sectors, or the other 9 versus the communication services and information technology, are very well poised to benefit, and we believe have already benefited in the efficiencies that corporations have had to navigate relatively tough waters through the great financial crisis, and most recently the COVID situation, the supply chain disruption, and dealing with overstimulation of the
Right.
economy, and now into a new world.
John, thank you. John Stoltzfus, optimistic. He is with OpCo. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. Lebanese authorities say 100 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in what would be the deadliest day in Lebanon in nearly a year of fighting against the Hezbollah militant group. The Lebanese Health Ministry said more than 400 others were wounded in the strikes in southern Lebanon. Rosalind Matheson is Bloomberg's news director for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa.
That's the big if, and what does that look like if it does happen? I mean, they're pretty much exchanging constant fire across the border. We have Israel saying it wants to move its residents back to the north of Israel into potentially harm's way, and it wants people in the south of Lebanon to move out of the way, because what they really want to do is push Hezbollah back. They want to push them back from the border. That means degrading Hezbollah in those areas, degrading all the infrastructure they've set up there, targeting their missile sites and so on.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson. President Biden and Vice President Harris will welcome the President of the United Arab Emirates to the White House today. National Security spokesman John Kirby says several issues will be discussed.
The President and the Vice President will discuss a number of bilateral and regional matters together with areas of deepening cooperation in advanced technology, clean energy, space, supply chain resiliency, and critical infrastructure investments.
In the afternoon, President Biden will head to New York for the UN General Assembly. The fallout continues for North Carolina's Republican candidate for governor. Over the weekend, several top staffers in Mark Robinson's campaign quit after a CNN report that claimed Robinson made racist and inflammatory comments on a porn site, including calling himself a black Nazi and expressing support for reinstating slavery. Robinson denied making the comments. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
The leaves fall. It is finally now the autumnal equinox. It's finally here. The weather the past 10 days, 12 days, 14 days has been the most California weather I have ever seen, like ever, in the Northeast.
And nearly equal amount of daylight and darkness at all latitudes. The autumnal
very
equinox.
Good.
You like that, right?
It's the autumnal equinox.
Not the vernal.
And
Not to
now
be
it
confused with
gets
the vernal.
Oh, listen to you. Astronomy with Damian. We'll be doing that tomorrow.
You got Bill Nye, man. What is this, man?
Damian Sassower, the science guy. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got modest gains on Wall Street. Indexes hovering near record highs, and this is after the Fed's rate cut last week. We have NASDAQ futures up about 0.2% at 20,069. Dow futures, little change, up 36 points at 42,479. And we have S&P futures up about 0.1% at 5,771. The two-year yield at 3.59%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.76%, and that's up 2 basis points. To currencies, we have the dollar stronger, Japanese yen stronger, the euro weaker, British pound stronger, Bitcoin, it's lower at about 63,000. We have shares of Intel up nearly 2%, and that's on takeover talk. Sources say rival Qualcomm, it's made a friendly buyout offer for the chipmaker, and also Apollo Global Management, that's talking about making a multi-billion-dollar investment of its own. And then sticking with chips, the Wall Street Journal reporting Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing and Samsung. They've discussed more than $100 billion of projects for chip factories in the UAE. That's coming in the coming years. And in other news, a new Bloomberg News analysis, it shows Novo Nordisk, well, it doesn't need to price its weight loss drugs so high to offset research spending. And that's because it says Ozempic, Wegovy on track to make $65 billion by the end of this year. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thanks so much. One of the great hallmarks of what Matt Winkler does, by the way, his entourage, Damian, you know, we got world leaders coming in to see Mr. Bloomberg here before we're at the Park Plaza tomorrow with the Earthshot Innovation Awards. Winkler's entourage is almost as big as some of the world leaders.
I mean, and a lot of Gen X.
I counted 40 people. Shinpei led it, but, you know.
Very young entourage, too.
It's an entourage.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge. Joining us now, the founder of Bloomberg News, editor-in-chief emeritus, and far more, somebody who said, can we just show, not tell, about the geographies of America? So I'm looking at Green Bay, Wisconsin. How'd they do this weekend, the Packers?
Packers did okay this weekend, yeah. But what about the Badgers? They didn't do so great against Bama.
The economy's doing great here. The lower than long-term average unemployment rate, Green Bay is 6%. I get that. Mm-hmm. And they're slotting in right now at 3.10%. Matt Winkler, you look at Wisconsin, that's the entire state, right?
Correct. And
it's radio, Matt. You got to say more than just correct.
So what you're getting at is what we decided to do, my colleague Shinpei and I, at the beginning of the year, is look at the 7 so-called swing states that are supposed to determine the outcome of presidential election in November. I won't discuss the Electoral College and how complicated that is, but there it is. And Wisconsin is one of the 7, and it's the last of the states that we looked at. And during the past 3.5 years, the Wisconsin rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic has been unprecedented. The performance of its economy in the 21st century has not been equaled as it has in the past
What's
3.5
the
years.
why?
And the why
it's
is
not Pabst Blue Ribbon beer. Is it agriculture?
the why is the Biden economy, and it starts with the first Biden Relief Act. Remember, 95% of Wisconsin is small business, family-owned farms. Guess what they got as soon as Biden got into office? They got sustenance that sustained them and then enabled them to power the economy forward. That's very overlooked. Since that time, manufacturing has had an enormous rebound in Wisconsin. And agriculture, of course, is the primary business, and it's a juggernaut. All of that has happened in the past 3.5 years. None of it got covered by national, local media, which are obsessed with public opinion polls. Finally, that Harris is leading in Arizona converges with the economic data, which, by the way, is consistent with all of the 7 swing states.
Matt Winkler in our studio is wearing a bow tie. It's like a bow tie sandwich. I'm between Tom and Matt Winkler. It's unbelievable.
I only got hired because I wore it.
We go back a long way, but I hired him.
Well, Matt, I mean, I really do have to ask you about Wisconsin. You know, we've had some people on today talking about the issues that matter most to voters. And, you know, in Wisconsin, it's very idiosyncratic. It's very unique. You know, what issue do you think matters most to Wisconsin right now, given the fact that the economy has recovered as well as it has?
Well, I would say first and foremost is health care. And I would say that because we know that abortion is literally on the ballot. But it's more than that. In his last debate, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance both said they would actually dismantle the Affordable Care Act. Now, what does that mean? Pre-existing conditions, remember how everybody talked about that and how much people hate that? Well, we would go back to pre-existing conditions if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance prevailed. So I do think Madison, Wisconsin is a huge population center. It's called the University of Wisconsin. There are a lot of people who are going to be very concerned about reproductive rights.
I want to address your decades of work in leadership during election seasons. Matt Winkler on the fixation, as you just mentioned, on polling. I just flat out don't trust it on the popular vote where every indication is the vice president is ahead, or the hopelessness of gaining the Electoral College or the swing states. In the years you were grinding this out, Matt, did polling add value?
More color than substance. And I would still insist that's more or less the problem with polling, is that it's more color than substance. It's a snapshot in a moment. It is not necessarily predictive. There's nothing to suggest that it is. The other thing is that there's a huge conflict of interest in our profession, that is the Fourth Estate. News organizations themselves shouldn't do public polling.
Did you do that, or did you farm it out to Des Moines?
Because we report the news, not create it. And so when a news organization is doing its own poll, guess what happens? You got the lead story and 17 sidebars, and you don't bother to mention anybody else's polls. That's the conflict of interest you don't want to see, and that's what we have right now.
So how do you, going here, we get the vice presidential debate, the ballet October 1st out of the way. Maybe we get a monologue on October 23rd. I don't know. Do the polls gain value closer to November 5th?
Of course they do. And, you know, the reason why the data, economic data, is so important is as people become aware of their own financial condition. You just got done reporting that the stock market is near all-time highs. The economy is going to have a soft landing. That wasn't predicted, that wasn't expected in all the poll stories this year that said the economy is
Fair.
lousy.
True.
The poll stories omitted that we were on track for getting inflation back to where the Fed wants it to be, which is where it is right now. None of that very important information was in the original poll stories starting in January, February, and so forth. Now that people are very aware of where they are in the economy, that is showing up in the polls. There's a harmonic convergence. So yes, we are getting close to where polls are going to tell us something meaningful.
Can you come back? We got to go, Dana.
We got to
We're
go,
out of time.
really?
It's
Oh,
just
Matthew
we got to get
Winkler.
the market open. But can you come back when you don't put out an essay? I would like to talk to you about what Liz Cheney said this weekend, where we need a third party, where she's saying, forward. I mean, Shinpei, can you put on his schedule that he can darken the door when he's not doing his Shinpei creative column?
Tom, we have had third parties in American electoral politics.
But she's talking about a different third
We had
party.
Norman Thomas. People forget Norman
we do.
Thomas.
Well, they forget Huey Long. They forget, Silver Guy there back with Grover Cleveland Alexander, the whole bit of it.
Yeah, we had a bunch of parties in the election of 1860.
Yes. See how this is the way my interview went when I was
Paging Ross Perot.
I was like, Daniel, it's Merriam-Webster, Daniel Webster. It's one of the two.
Abraham Lincoln won with.
One of my offspring this weekend asked, was Abraham Lincoln a Republican?
He was a Republican,
I almost punched him.
and he won with less than the majority of voters in 1860.
Matt Winkler, thank you so much. And the road trip, see, he did this in college. He's a Kenyan, and they did a road trip to Madison.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
where he got it, Wisconsin.
They still have horses
Now,
and buggies
what
in Midtown.
swing state are you
Madison.
doing next? Seriously.
We're done.
You're done? You did
This
them all.
Wisconsin was the last.
Okay, we'll
W.
do New Jersey. New Jersey is going to be a swing state next time around. Matthew Winkler, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, Bloomberg News. We need to get the markets open now. We do S&P futures up 9, Dow futures. Matt Winkler doesn't want me to quote Dow futures. I'm sorry, I do. I'm old school, up 44. The VIX 16.34. Damian Sassower and Tom Keene. Stay with us on YouTube, on radio across the nation, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Damian Sassower with your opening bell report. How are the markets going to kick off this new week of trading after the Fed's rate cut last week? We have more economic data that's for traders to look through this week, including the Fed's preferred price metric, also data on U.S. personal spending that's due out on Friday. But before we get to all that, we have to get the markets open. So we are off and running. Let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500 up about 0.2%, 11 points, 5,716. We have the Dow a little changed, up about 29 points at 42,090. And finally, the NASDAQ up 0.2%, 46 points at 17,994. We head over to the two-year yield, 3.59%. That's little change. The yield on the 10-year, 3.76%, and that's up 1 basis point. To commodities, we have spot gold higher, $2,629 an ounce. We have Brent crude higher at $74 a barrel. WTI crude, $71 a barrel. At the open, I want to check in with Intel. Their shares up more than 2.5%. That is a Bloomberg opening bell report. Tom and Damian.
Lisa, thank you so much. Joining us now, one of the most interesting people, Regina Mayer, joins us with KPMG. And she's got some fancy title, International Global Head of Clients and Markets. She is definitive on hydrocarbons and particularly the span of America. And all of this comes over a twisted childhood in Hawaii. Regina, what was it like, the emotion when I went to Pearl Harbor? I can't convey how unprepared I was for the Arizona and the memorial at Pearl Harbor. You grew up basically on the flight path of the Japanese coming in from the north. What was it like growing up in Pearl City, Hawaii?
Well, it's an interesting question that you asked, Tom. I mean, it was very fundamental to who I am and how I grew up. I mean, it was just a part of everyday life. As a child, you would always take school visits to the memorial. It was always very somber. You know, the ship continues to weep as it continues to seep oil. So it is almost like it continues to cry. And my maternal grandmother was a child during that time, or maybe not a child, maybe even just a teenager. And there were bullets in the homes that they lived in, strafed by pilots. So it's very, very real for me growing up.
And you were plugged in to an international spectrum there, which of course you've done with your service to the nation in Brussels with Stavridis and NATO and all that. Are we energy independent now? Because to an extent, that's how World War II started in the Pacific Rim, was over worries about hydrocarbons. Is America energy independent now, Regina Mayer?
I don't know that I would go so far as to say we're energy independent, because the energy ecosystem is so integrated. Components come from different parts of the world. And obviously we are fundamental to Europe's ability to wean itself off Russian gas with the LNG imports. So while I feel a lot better about U.S. energy security, given the vast reserves that we have and our technological ability to access them at increasingly lower cost levels, but our ability to manage that globally and the integrated supply chains that we run, I don't know that anyone can ever say they would be an island and completely energy independent.
Regina,
but we're clearly rich in energy resources.
Regina, when I think about the price of oil, I think of, China, I think of the potential for geopolitical risk out of the Middle East. But, one of the things that I think we should probably be thinking about as we get into the autumnal equinox is weather risk, U.S. hurricane season. Talk to us a little bit about what your expectations are as we head into the second half of this year.
Well, I think we had higher expectations that it would be even more fundamental in terms of hurricane risks. We've had Beryl, we've had Francine. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. November 1st is the official end of hurricane season, but we're expecting that to go longer. I do think that the industry is pretty resilient and is able to manage the potential for hurricanes in our path. And so we shut down pretty quickly, we start up pretty quickly, but that's not to minimize the risk and the potential for disruption that's quite significant.
Right. Markets open for trading, markets doing better than futures showed. Standard & Poor's 500 up 12 points, 0.2%. Dow just moments ago up 100 points, 42,100 on the Dow. The VIX stasis, 16.27. Damian?
And bond yields are up across the board there, Tom, also. But let's talk about commodities a little bit more here, Regina. I mean, talk to us about, once the Fed first starts cutting, you look out 12 months and commodities tend to perform well, but this is a very, very, very dynamic, unparalleled environment. What are your expectations for the broad commodity complex as we head into the end of this year?
Yeah, dynamic's a good word for it. I mean, I think we're actually expecting relative stability. If one of the statistics I think that's very noteworthy is that Brent has been quite stable. It had 8 consecutive months trading between $80 and $90 per barrel, and that's unprecedented. In September, it dipped, but we're expecting that to stabilize back up in the low 80s through the rest of the year because we see inventory draws. We expect about 1 million barrels per day supply withdrawals that'll make the price stay pretty high, but we're expecting it would drop in Q1 2025 as OPEC starts unleashing more production into the supply and demand balances itself out. So frankly, we're seeing quite strong stability in the commodity price outlook.
A gallon of gas. I mean, this is, beneath what you do every day, Regina. We had a spike up to $5 a gallon. We're sort of down here right now to support it. Let's call it $3.10, $3.20, $3.30. Is a gallon of gas still an election issue at KPMG?
I don't think it's as fundamental to people's pocketbooks as it has been, Tom. I mean, you got to come down to my neck of the woods. It's $2.70, $2.60. You can even find it in some spots for regular unleaded. So it's not hitting pocketbooks as dramatically as it was. And I think consumer spending continues to be quite bullish. So I haven't seen those stickers on the gas pumps that we've seen in the past, and I don't see it being such a hot button election issue right now.
Regina, Brent crude off 3% this month, iron ore off another 12% this month. Wow, iron ore down 30% year to date. I mean, are we getting confirmation from the commodity complex that global growth is slowing?
For sure, we're seeing softening in demand and a lot of concern about demand coming out of China. I think it's down overall 3% this year. And I think the statistic that I looked at is in the last 20 years, it's only been down 3 times in that span, one of which was a COVID year. So that's a very real metric that shows softening global demand, which is having an impact on commodity prices.
I mean, Bloomberg Commodity Index, I mean, it had a little pop off the bottom.
Yep.
Maybe, is there going to be a new super cycle?
Well,
much for the super cycle, Damian.
Well, right. I mean, we're now down 0.3% year to date. I mean, the commodity complex was broadly stronger for the better part of this entire year. So, I mean, I guess the question for me, Regina, is what does that read through typically tell us? And more importantly, when you do look at Brent crude oil, and we are getting awfully close to contango here. And contango, insofar as credit markets and equity markets are concerned, has never really been a good thing. So talk to us a little bit about the shape of the futures curve here in oil. What are you taking away from that?
Yeah, I mean, we think it's unnaturally low right now, as I indicated, because we see inventory drawdowns. We expect inventory drawdowns through the rest of this calendar year. And we don't, OPEC has publicly said that they're going to delay their putting production back into the market until at least December. So I think that the price is quite low, and that's why you're seeing the backwardation contango curve coming together. I think I go back to Brent should be in the 80s, and that's a comfortable sweet spot, and that's where I expect it to be.
So Brent right now, 74.55.
The bargain.
West Texas Intermediate, 71.5. The $3 gap between American oil and global oil, to me, seems unusual. Am I right?
Yeah, that's usually there's more of a $5 to $7 swing. Historically, it's even been as much as 10.
And you're saying Brent crude, you're saying global oil comes up.
And West WTI should be in the mid 70s, mid to high 70s. So we have seen that gap close pretty substantially, and I do think it's because U.S. crude is making its way into the market in the form of LNG and in the form of liquids, and it's becoming more of a global price setter.
Regina, thank you so much. Regina Mayer, particularly those comments on your childhood in Hawaii. That's very cool.
Yeah, very
Regina
cool.
Mayer, thank you so much. The KPMG International and Global Head of Credit Markets with Commodities. Damian there, I thought on iron ore, that was great. I mean, it's just China.
Yeah, but what's interesting is, copper's actually up on the year. So it's not just like industrial metals complex is really coming off. It's really pockets of it. So, you got to pick your spots, I guess.
China. Well, we'll
China.
have to see on that. Red and green on the screen, suddenly market pulls back a little bit. Dow, negative 13.
Yeah.
With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Damian, Lisa. It is the deadliest barrage since the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war. Israeli strikes today killed more than 180 Lebanese. The Israeli military warned residents in southern and eastern Lebanon to evacuate their homes ahead of a widening air campaign against Hezbollah. More than 400 other people were wounded in the strikes. The Israeli military announced that it hit some 300 targets today, saying it was going after Hezbollah weapons sites. The man who police say tried to potentially assassinate former President Donald Trump in Florida will be in court today. Loyola law professor and former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson has more on Ryan Routh.
This will be a detention hearing. The court will decide whether he gets bond pending trial, but I think that's very unlikely given the nature of charges and given his background as well.
Former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson. Routh so far has been charged with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon and possession and receipt of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. But U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says a charge of apparent assassination attempt is being investigated by the FBI. An influx of support from Wall Street to Silicon Valley has put up a huge campaign advantage for Kamala Harris. As Bloomberg's David Gura reports, the Democrat is outspending former President Trump by nearly $5 million a day.
Looking at advertising alone, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars going into Election Day, the most ever spent by a presidential campaign, and as you noted, greatly exceeding what former President Trump has and is spending. So look, it's going toward traditional advertising on television, digital advertising as well, and then the all-important ground game.
Bloomberg's David Gura hosts the Big Take podcast. Finally, the White Sox have tied the 1962 Mets for losing the most games ever in a season, 120. Tomorrow, the White Sox play the Angels. It could happen. It's global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Damian, Lisa.
I got caught 30 seconds of White Sox ball this weekend. They put up the lineup. The highest batting average of their lineup was 247.
Oh,
wow. For our people worldwide, that there's no Premier League equivalent to this. This is where relegation. I'm sorry, they do it better in Europe, where they would relegate the bottom three teams. Everybody's behavior would change.
I feel sorry for him. You could own the record that nobody wants.
Well, that's it, Michael Barr. I'll tell you who I don't feel sorry for, the New York Mets, because they've lived under that shroud for a very, very long time, and I'm sure they'd love to pass the buck over to the White Sox. And by the way, the Mets are looking pretty good. They're
looking wonderful.
Games up on the Braves here.
Amazing.
Last spot for that wild card.
They had a trade deadline pick. They picked up a guy named Scott Havens.
Special call out to Scott Havens.
It worked. Okay, we got to cover this because Jess had a tantrum at 7 a.m. this morning. Texas A&M rocketing up the NCAA football polls from 25 to 24. A&M looks destined.
Look, I wish I could say I know a lot about him. I don't know. Is A&M Jacob Jordan, wide receiver, freshman, sophomore? He may be Texas Tech, not Texas A&M. But keep your eyes on Jacob Jordan. That kid is fast and he has hands. And
really?
He's really good. He's a really outstanding athlete.
Miami is number 7. I did not know this, Damian. This is the number one thing I've learned today.
That's it. That's right. Of course, no. They picked up that quarterback from Washington State. It's amazing. You thought that the quarterback that they lost last year would leave him with a hole in the lineup. Not so, my friend. And there is a path, believe it or not, Tom Keene, for Miami to be one of the top 6 teams in the nation by the time the playoffs roll around. That means they can easily get to the semifinals.
So that's
another
really big
junket
for you. Yeah. You'll figure out some Bloomberg
Absolutely. No. I looked up. I looked up where the championship's going to be this year. The College Football Championship will be held in New Orleans at the Superdome, and if the Hurricanes do make it there,
so the way this works, Michael,
me and Michael Barr,
you're going to have Bloomberg Intelligence EM panel, Narlands, like 2 days after.
Narlands.
That's the way it works. Damian, thank you so much. We're going to continue here. I believe Jess Manton on our date calendar here on the news. I want to ask her about Qualcomm Intel. Robert Schiffman out with an incredible note this morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we've got a mixed look on Wall Street. Traders waiting for some more clues, further easing after the Fed's half percentage point interest rate cut last week. We're getting some more economic data out right now. S&P Global U.S. Manufacturing PMI for September. The survey was for 48.6, came in at 47 even. Then we have S&P Global U.S. Services PMI. The survey was for 55.2, came in at 55.4. The previous was 55.7. All right, let's get to some stocks on the move. That's Tesla. Shares up more than 3.5%. Analysts in Barclays, well, they see third quarter deliveries coming in at about 470,000 vehicles, and that's higher than expected. Then you have General Motors down 3%. Bernstein cut its recommendation to market perform from outperform, and they say there might be rising earnings headwinds. And finally, cosmetics retailer Ulta Beauty down nearly 3%. TD Cowen cut its recommendation to hold from buy. They said falling younger customer growth and also increasing competition. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Damian.
Have the analyst at TD Cowen stop by for a beverage of his choice and look at my daughter's bathroom. I counted 53 chemicals.
It's all about the skincare.
It's all about Ulta.
Yes.
And, you know, that it's like ridiculous. I'm depressed. Let's talk right now, folks. Damian Sassower and Tom Keene. Sweeney.
Hi there.
For the week. Tomorrow, David Gurr at the Plaza Hotel. And right now, on this Intel, Qualcomm, Apollo thing, here's the lay of the land. In the equity space, I'm stunned. Jess Menton joins us, deputy equity, something like that.
That works.
That means she works 8 days a week. I'm thunderstruck. Equal weight, hold, neutral, hold, pure perform, one underperform from BNP Paribas, hold, neutral. Nobody's enthusiastic about an Intel lift. Why?
Well, a lot of it is because its stock is amongst some of the worst in the S&P 500 year to date. And it's a really contrasting view because if you look at the other chip makers, of course, the SOX is the index, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index that obviously tracks the chip makers, been on a tear once again this year in addition to last year, so up another 20%. But if you look at Intel year to date, down over 55%. So it's a very different story if you're looking at that versus, say, of course, NVIDIA and other types of chip makers there. And there's been this ongoing kind of, they're struggling to turn around the company. So obviously you have different reports, like obviously today earlier in the terminal, we heard about how Apollo was saying it was going to offer a multi-billion-dollar deal for Intel. But then this just came off the back of the other news that we got when it came to Qualcomm. So they were floating a potential friendly takeover of Intel as well. So this is something where you have obviously a lot of interest in this company as it's been struggling.
Jess, Melius analyst Ben Reitze said acquiring Intel, quote, would be a mouthful for Qualcomm. And look, Ben Reitze, he was a year older than me at Vanderbilt University. He was in my fraternity. He hazed me, so I have something, but look, I still enjoy Ben. Very good analyst, very competent. A mouthful for Qualcomm. I mean, what's in it for Qualcomm here?
Right. So that's the big thing because Qualcomm has been kind of firing on all cylinders here. And especially when you think about when it comes to expanding that type of company. And there was a lot of interest as far as when it came to shareholders in recent years of how do you continue to sort of to diversify and especially the assets when it comes to Qualcomm. So that's something that you feel like you have shareholder pressure to start looking in other directions as well as it continues to grow because it is a powerhouse type company. So where else to look than other companies that are weaker right now? And so then comes in Intel.
I mean, Schiffman, the combo from Bloomberg Intelligence, and this is Damian's world. You got the equity side from Gina and the team.
That's right.
And the bond side with Robert Schiffman. And I think they're sort of on a page, it's a no-brainer, but does the government get in the way with the emotion of Intel? I mean, my book of the summer's Chip War, Damian.
Yeah.
And Noyce and all of Intel's through that, chapter 22, Disrupting Intel. This has been going on for a decade.
Yeah, I mean, Jess, you have to help me out here. Where are we in the semiconductor cycle, in your opinion? I mean, no one really has an answer yet. I mean, are we going to be restocking? I mean, what does TSMC tell you?
Well, that's a good point because it depends on the type of chip company we're talking about versus whether you are something that is a memory type of chip maker or also if you're saying more in the space of what you're using that is tied, obviously, to AI. And so I think that's where the downfall when it comes to Intel because they are just lagging some of their bigger competitors. But I would want to point out, though, ever since, if you look back at when they had the changing in the weightings for the XLKs, the ETF that tracks the technology sector in the S&P 500, we had some rebalancing going on again. But ever since the weightings shifted back in June, where actually NVIDIA was a larger weighting than it had been versus Apple. Apple's now outperforming NVIDIA in that time span. So that particular corner of the market for that ETF hasn't been performing as strong as it should have been because NVIDIA's weighting was a much smaller for 6 quarters before it got shifted into there. So really it has to do with when you're talking about the AI story, memory chip makers, and where those types of chip makers fall and what they focus on.
Well, talk to me about the role Apollo plays here. I mean, obviously we know private equity giant Apollo. They're talking about perhaps making a very large investment in Intel. I mean, what's the benefit to them here?
Well, they already have a relationship with Intel, so that's the way in that it's going. So it's a little bit of a different story than when we were talking about what's happening with Qualcomm.
But when you saw $5 billion, did that seem like a big number to you?
So when I spoke with analysts, they had differing opinions. So some said it seemed like it was a little bit of a bigger number than they were expecting, but then also they were thinking that maybe given what it could diversify for that type of corner of the market, maybe that makes sense to them. So kind of the jury's still out on that. But still, I mean, that is a kind of eye-popping number there.
I look at this mating, with all the emotion of we're going to manufacture in America. From your equity team, do we see a confidence that we can manufacture if it's, I don't even know what the name would be, Intel? If they mate, do they have global gravitas?
Well, I think another big thing here too is when you factor in where the global economy is, we're in these rate cutting cycles, not just the Federal Reserve, other than the Bank of Japan because they're in another direction. But when you think about more M&A happening and more acquisitions happening, that's typically what you would still see in a stronger economy right now. And so when people are talking more of a macro type look, when you see things like this happening, that kind of is something that bodes well in their minds as far as where the space is going. But also chip makers tie into how the economy is performing. That is a big bellwether to when you think about supply and demand. So the fact that you would see different issues like this where it comes to takeovers or M&A, that is a sign that would bode well.
Jess, we didn't have you in here for this. Nobody cares. Okay, Bowling Green, big
that's
deal.
why you brought me in.
Okay.
Texas A&M.
You got LSU coming up down the road. You got ranked Missouri before that. Let's say the Fighting Texas Aggies get by Missouri, by LSU. The only game that matters is November 30.
Well, are we all going to go?
No, our question is, are you going? The Minton box.
The Minton box. I'm working on it. I'm figuring out how to get a box there so we can all go.
Do you sit next to the Corps of Cadets? Because they stand through the whole thing.
Yeah, when I was in college, I did. You're right there. That's where all the energy is. That's where all the vibe. I mean, it is a whole vibe there in the whole stadium at Kyle Field. But I feel like in particular when you're near the Corps, that's a whole other level of vibes.
Do they still do the bonfire?
So the school does not condone the one they do off of campus, so there are smaller ones that they do.
Very politically correct there, Jess.
Right, exactly. Yes. So they no longer do them. They haven't done them for over 20 years. There was a tragedy in the late 90s. Yeah. But when I was there in college, they still had some that were off campus, but that was not something that the university condoned and were not anywhere a part of. So I wanted to make that clear.
I just think Aggies ought to fly Jess Minton down and get her at the 50-yard line.
No casting shade on the
blue.
Who
do we need to talk to make this happen? Maybe Johnny Football?
We could do a remote. Texas A&M, November 30. It's not the game of the season.
You ever been to the National Corvette Museum in Kentucky?
No.
Oh, it's right there by Bowling Green. Really?
No, I have not. We should make it another
I was in Nashville.
Trip.
I know more about that state than I need to.
What's the likelihood of Intel Qualcomm?
Oh, goodness. I mean, a lot of that just comes down to the regular. I mean, that's the million-dollar question that a lot of analysts can't really pinpoint at this point.
No way it's happening.
But I feel like there's going to be
Damian Sassower?
Zero probability. I just don't see how they're going to let that happen. I mean, especially given recent evidence on just how tight things have gotten here in the U.S. with the regulator.
And now, folks, 35 seconds here. We are pleased to bring you surveillance congestion correspondent John Tucker. John, will you be able to get home today, or are you staying at the Regency Hotel, Park Avenue?
I plan on being in my car, so I should get home
or you'll
tomorrow,
sleep in your
Wednesday.
Car.
Yeah, no, it's a comfortable car.
It's that bad to get across Midtown?
I haven't looked. I should go. 3rd Avenue is always bad, but today, and here's my solution. 95% of these diplomats, nobody knows who they are. Just take the subway.
Oh, be nice now.
I'm being nice. I'm being totally truthful.
John Tucker, our congestion correspondent. We'll speak to him tomorrow. Damian Sassower, thank you for joining us this morning. Right now, we're doing San Francisco music. Steve Miller, Space Cowboy for Maurice.
walks through my door. I'm a space cowboy. Bet you were ready for that. I'm a space